The sea wind pushed at the lines of prisoners as they climbed the gangway in silence. Boots thudded on steel. A gull cried once and the sound fell behind them. They had been captured far from home, under a white sun, and now they were sailing toward a coast they had only known from maps and rumors. Guards gave simple orders in clear English. Stand here. Keep the line. A ship horn sounded and the convoy began to move. The men watched the shore shrink, watched the water darken, and felt the engine set a slow and patient rhythm under their feet. On deck, the rules were strict but predictable. A guard checked names. A medic checked temperatures and hands for infection. A cook ladled stew that smelled of onions and meat and set down thick slices of white bread. The prisoners ate in silence at first, then in little murmurs of disbelief. They had expected thin soup. They had expected rough treatment. Instead they saw ordinary procedures done with calm care. At night they lay in bunks and felt the hull tremble as the Atlantic rolled by. The ship lights were shaded, and the corridor bulbs made a soft tunnel of yellow. Someone whispered a prayer in German. Someone else described fields from home. The ocean answered with a low and endless note. Days blended. A chaplain visited the deck and spoke without anger. The guards kept to routine. A nurse set a dressing on a cut finger and said that it would heal well if kept clean. The prisoners stared at the kindness as if it were a trick. In the distance, a gray destroyer cut the waves, turning now and then like a shepherd dog. One morning, the horizon lifted, colored itself in green and stone, and became the coast of Great Britain. Docks appeared. Cranes swung with a smooth authority. The ship eased alongside a pier and the rope lines groaned as they took the weight. A whistle blew, and the gangway clanged into place. They stepped down in files. Air smelled of coal smoke and salt, of tar and wet rope. A rail yard hummed with orderly motion. It was not grand and it was not theatrical. It was competent. It was ready. A sergeant read instructions. A corporal pointed to a long shed and said in careful German that registration would be quick if everyone cooperated. The prisoners moved forward and saw tables with stacks of forms, typewriters, ink pads, and small cameras. The first man sat, gave his name, and faced the lens. The shutter clicked. A card slid into a wooden box marked with a number. He was told to follow the line to medical inspection and then to the reception camp. He nodded. The line moved. The system did not shout. The system simply worked. Inside the intake hall the light was soft and steady. A nurse checked eyes and ears. A doctor looked at an old wound and said it would be treated that afternoon. A translator explained the rules of the Geneva Convention in German that was slow and kind. There would be work assignments. There would be letters allowed. There would be no punishment without cause. A table held small packets of soap and a comb for each man. Another table held tin cups that clinked like bells when stacked. The prisoners glanced at one another and at the guards, searching for the trap, and found only order. From the docks they were marched to a waiting train. Not boxcars, but carriages with benches, windows, and clean floors. Steam drifted along the platform like breath in winter. The engine gave a gentle cough and a cloud of white rolled past the windows. As the train pulled away, the men leaned to see rows of brick houses with tiny gardens. Children waved from a fence. A woman in a scarf paused with a basket in her hands and then lifted her arm in a quick greeting, unsure, polite, and real. In the carriage, a soldier poured hot tea from a metal urn and added milk and sugar without being asked. The flavor shocked them with its warmth. Fields opened and closed. Hedges drew lines across the land like writing. Church towers and mill chimneys flickered past, and then a wide river with barges and a tug that pushed and never seemed to tire. The carriage smelled faintly of soap and coal and steam. The rhythm of the wheels was calm, like a promise that nothing wild would happen today. They reached a camp ringed by wire and wooden watchtowers. A sign at the gate named the place and the unit in charge. Inside, barracks stood in neat rows. A storehouse. A cookhouse. A medical hut with a red cross painted in a clean circle. The commandant welcomed them with a short speech. Work would come soon, he said. Farms needed hands. Roads needed mending. There would be pay in camp currency. There would be letters home after censors read them. No one cheered and no one groaned. The words fell into a silence that was not quite fear and not quite relief. A guard led them to their bunks. Mattresses were thin but even. Blankets were folded square. A stove sat in the center and gave a small, steady heat. In the mess, the stew was thick. The bread was fresh. The tea was hot again. That night, as lights clicked off one by one, a man whispered that he did not understand this country. Another said that perhaps understanding was not required. Perhaps honest work and a clean bed were enough for now. Outside, a patrol boot crunched on gravel and moved away. Inside, the bunkhouse breathed in unison. Far beyond the wire, a village slept and would wake to a day of ordinary life. The prisoners listened to the quiet and felt the first thin thread of safety tug their thoughts toward a future they had not dared to imagine. Morning begins before sunrise. A bell rings across the frosted fields. Barrack doors open and a line of men steps into the chill. The routine is exact. Washington fold blankets. Sweep the floorboards. A quiet roll call in the yard, boots on gravel, breath steaming in the pale light. The commandant speaks through an interpreter. The rules are simple and firm. No weapons. No alcohol. No gambling. No leaving the compound without a pass. Respect the guards. Respect the schedule. Break a rule and you lose privileges. Keep the rules and you earn trust. Breakfast is plain but steady. Porridge in deep metal bowls. Bread still warm from the camp bakery. Tea poured into dented mugs. The mess line moves quickly. A notice board lists work parties, clinic hours, chapel times, and the day for letters. The letters are censored, yet they are lifelines. Men bend over thin paper and write slowly. They describe weather, work, and health. They do not write about troop movements. They do not write about escape. The censors stamp each envelope and pile them like small bricks of hope. After breakfast the camp breathes into order. Tools are counted out. The infirmary checks fevers and dressings. The barber sets a chair outside and shaves a queue of strangers who are learning to become neighbors. A guard walks the fence. He is alert, but not cruel. He nods to the librarian who unlocks a hut of dog-eared novels and grammar books. The football pitch is marked with lime dust. A volunteer coach sets out 2 battered balls. A violin phrase drifts from a barrack doorway, thin as morning mist, and then fades. At midday a siren signals the pause. Stew, potatoes, carrots, and the smell of onions. Men trade stories of farms in Saxony, of shipyards in Kiel, of mines in the Ruhr. A medical orderly stops by each table and asks about sleep and pain. After lunch there is inspection. Boots lined heel to heel. Tin cups stacked. Floors swept. The commandant walks through with a clipboard. He does not shout. He points. He explains. He expects order. He acknowledges effort. The day moves on like a well-kept clock. Afternoon brings rhythm and purpose. Work teams repair fences, plant cabbage, mend carts, stitch boots, and cut timber. The camp has a quiet economy. Tokens are earned for neat work and safe work. Tokens buy a bar of soap, a pencil, a shirt, a mouth organ. Safety is never a slogan. Hammers and saws are checked out and checked in. Kerosene lamps are trimmed. Fire buckets stand full by every door. A drill bell rings once a week and every man walks the route to the assembly field. The guards time the drill and sign the sheet. Education fills the late hours. English lessons in a hut that smells of chalk and tea. Men repeat simple phrases until they begin to fit in the mouth like bread. A volunteer draws a map of Britain on a board and names the counties slowly. Another man gives a talk on crop rotation. A chaplain speaks about peace and conscience. The library closes and the football teams return, shirts muddy and spirits high. The canteen opens for 1 hour. Laughter rises. Quarrels sometimes spark and then die under the steady look of a sergeant who trusts the room to choose calm. Evening is the softest hour. Supper is soup and bread and a slice of cheese. The infirmary lights glow behind frosted glass. A dentist chair creaks. A fever cools. A band of amateurs tunes a violin, an accordion, and a drum made from a tin. They play old songs that stretch a bridge to home. The floodlights blink on at the perimeter, not as a threat, but as a boundary that all understand. A guard carries a cat that has made the rounds of every hut and earned a dozen names. Lights out comes with a final bell. The barracks settle. A man counts the day in simple blessings. Warm food. Clean sheets. A fair word from a guard. A letter promised for Friday. The routine has edges of steel, yet within those edges something human grows. Order brings safety. Safety brings dignity. Dignity brings curiosity. Curiosity brings language and thought and plans. By the time sleep takes the camp, the men are no longer only prisoners of war. They are workers, students, teammates, neighbors in a fragile peace, learning that the road from captivity to community is walked one rule, one task, one kind act at a time. The trucks stop at the edge of a wide English field. The morning is cool and bright. German prisoners of war step down and feel damp grass under their boots. A British farm steward calls the roll with calm authority. There is no shouting. There is only the sound of crows and the distant knock of a tractor. The men line up in work teams. A farmer named Thomas greets them with careful English and clear gestures. He shows spades, sacks, and a cart. He points to the rows of potatoes that run like long brown rivers toward the hedgerows. Work begins. The soil is heavy with last night's rain. Hands find a steady rhythm. Lift, twist, drop. A cart creaks forward. Breath turns to steam in the cold light. Thomas moves down the line and corrects a grip. He shows how to lift without strain. He thanks a man who learns fast. The men look at one another. This is not the cruelty they feared. This is a day of work that makes sense. At noon a break arrives. The farm family brings tea in tin mugs and bread with cheese. The prisoners hold the food with quiet surprise. They taste warmth and simple kindness. Afternoon passes with faster tempo. The first cart fills. A boy no older than 16 backs the tractor with care. He smiles shyly and hands out fresh sacks. The team switch to beat rows and learn how to cut tops cleanly. The air fills with the pepper smell of leaves. Laughter appears like small sparks. Someone hums an old tune from home. Thomas listens and nods in time. In the late light, the field looks like a patchwork of order where chaos was in the morning. Back at the camp the men count their tokens for the day. They can buy soap, writing paper, and a little chocolate. In the barracks they compare calluses with pride. Letters are written to families. They describe the tractor, the tea, the quiet respect. They describe the feeling that labor can be honest and free from fear. Lights go out. The smell of earth stays on their hands. Sleep comes quickly. Tomorrow there will be another field, another cart, another set of rows that begin and end with choice and dignity. The next farm is an orchard near the coast. Dawn arrives with low mist and soft gull calls. The British foreman explains the plan. Pick only the ripe fruit. Leave the bruised fruit on the ground for feed. Work by column and move the ladders together. The men spread out like chess pieces across the grid of trees. Hands learn the gentle twist that saves the stem. Baskets fill. The foreman checks the first stack and offers a thumbs up. The rhythm becomes smooth again. The orchard warms. Bees drift through light that turns from silver to gold. By midday the men eat under the trees. The farmer's wife pours tea and passes apples that smell of sun. She asks simple questions in patient English. Where are you from? Do you have children? The answers are short but sincere. A bridge forms that is stronger than any fence. Afternoon brings a visit to the packing shed. The prisoners see belts that move the fruit, paper that wraps each apple, labels that mark the farm with pride. One man who worked in a factory before the war studies the motion of the gears and smiles. He sees order and purpose, not slogans and fear. Harvest weeks turn into a season. The men rotate through dairies, mills, and fields. They learn to mend fences and lay drains. They learn to set aside anger and to measure time by weather. In church halls they play football on Sundays. After the match there is tea and talk. The English speak of ration books with humor. The prisoners speak of hard winters with honesty. When frost comes, work moves to barns and sheds. The smell of hay and oil fills the air. Hands that once held rifles learn to plane a beam and true a door. By spring the change is clear. The men greet the farmers by name. They share jokes and new words. They write home with plans rather than despair. They imagine small farms rebuilt with clean wells and strong roofs. They imagine villages where neighbors shake hands and debts are paid in work, not in threats. When the trucks roll again, the men look back at the fields and the hedgerows. They understand that labor, fairness, and patience have done more than any speech. They have turned captivity into community, and work into a path that leads home. Morning fog lifts from the hedgerows, and the village bell calls people to Sunday service. The German prisoners stand by the gate with a guard and a local farmer. No one smiles yet. Curiosity moves quicker than fear. Old men straighten their hats. Children hide behind skirts and peek out. The prisoners remove their caps and listen from the path. The hymn rises, gentle and steady. When it ends, the vicar steps outside and greets the farmer first, then the guard, then the prisoners. His voice is calm. He thanks them for the harvest work and asks about their health. The men answer in careful English and nod with relief when he speaks a few words in German. The villagers take a second look. The wall shifts by a single stone. Work days grow longer. In the fields, rhythms begin to match. The farmer speaks slowly. He points, he shows, he waits. A prisoner repeats the action, then perfects it. A second prisoner teaches a third. By noon, they move like one team. The farmer pours tea from a dented flask and passes cups along the row. He adds milk and sugar as if he is serving neighbors. The men say thank you in English, and the word sounds right in their mouths. In the afternoon a tractor bogs down in the wet edge of a lane. The biggest prisoner wades into the mud with the farmer. They push together. The machine lurches free. The farmer laughs for the first time. He slaps the man on the shoulder. The guard looks at the clock and says nothing. Market day brings a new test. The prisoners arrive in a lorry with sacks of potatoes. They wear plain armbands and carry tokens for small purchases. The butcher watches with folded arms. The grocer lifts a brow. A woman behind a stall of apples weighs out an extra piece of fruit and slides it across the table. She says that hard work deserves a good lunch. The men bow and pay with tokens. No one is sure if that is allowed. No one objects. Music from a tinny radio drifts through the square. A pair of boys roll a cloth ball back and forth. One prisoner taps the ball with his boot. A boy kicks it back. Laces tear, laughter arrives, and a match begins without a word. For 20 minutes the game has only rules of play and shouts of goal. When the lorry pulls away, the butcher raises a hand in a short farewell. The grocer nods once. The fruit seller closes her till with a soft smile. The square exhales. Rain comes. Work slows. The farmer says they will fix fences and tools under shelter. In the barn the air smells of oil and wet hay. The prisoners find a broken gate hinge and set up a clean workbench. The youngest man draws a neat plan in charcoal on a scrapboard. He drills, files, and fits the pieces with care. The hinge swings like a clock hand. The farmer watches the craft and sees a son or a brother in the face of a former enemy. He says that a good hand is a good hand in any language. They share bread with cheese and a slice of pickled onion. The barn light glows warm. The guard leans on the door and hums the hymn from Sunday. Evening settles, and a small storm rattles the roof. The farmer's wife steps into the barn with a tray of mugs. The smell of strong tea carries a promise of rest. She speaks softly and points to a stove in the corner. Steam fills the air and coats cold fingers with comfort. One prisoner remembers his mother's kitchen. He does not say so, but he works faster. The wife notices a frayed sleeve and disappears. She returns with a sewing kit and mends the tear while the man holds still in quiet surprise. The stitch is practical and neat. She nods once and returns to the house. No speech is needed. The men stand a little taller. On the next Sunday the vicar invites the prisoners to stand inside the doorway out of the wind. The guard agrees. The first pews remain empty, but the music needs no permission to travel. After the hymn, a small girl offers a paper program to a prisoner. He whispers thank you. She beams with pride at the perfect exchange. After the service, the vicar organizes a friendly football match on the green. Villagers against farmhands and prisoners together. Positions shuffle, boots slip on grass, and laughter wins before the final whistle. The score does not matter. What matters is a field without lines of hatred. Letters begin to cross the channel more regularly. The censors stamp them, and the men clutch those thin envelopes like winter coal. A farmer's wife lends a dictionary so that one prisoner can write to his sister in careful English. He says that he is alive, that he is working, that people are fair. He tells her about the apple woman and the muddy tractor and the hymn that sounds like home even in another tongue. She writes back weeks later and asks for a description of the sea. He answers with the smell of salt and rope and rain. With spring, trust steps beyond the fields. A shopkeeper asks a prisoner to fix a sewing machine that has stalled for months. The man takes it apart on brown paper, lays out every gear, cleans each tooth, and brings it to life. The shopkeeper insists on payment and presses tokens into his palm. The man refuses. The shopkeeper presses harder. The man accepts and buys a loaf for the barracks. On the walk back he breaks the bread into equal shares. The guard takes none. The men eat and tell the story 3 times. One evening a storm knocks out power in the lane. The village gathers in the hall. Candles burn low. A local fiddler plays a slow tune, then a faster one. A prisoner claps the rhythm. Another joins with a soft harmony, not a full song, just a line to lift the melody. The room warms with sound. No one asks for an encore. It happens anyway. When the rain stops, the moon shows a road washed clean. The farmers shake hands with the prisoners as they part. The grip is firm. The eyes are level. The walk back to camp feels shorter than before. The first bridges hold. Tomorrow there will be work, and there will also be tea, and the gap between captive and neighbor will be smaller again by a single step. The first weeks on the farms were quiet. Then the cracks appeared. One cold morning a farmer accused a young prisoner of war named Carl of hiding a wrench in his coat. The men froze. A single tool felt like a threat. The British guard checked Carl's pockets and found only a broken pencil and a folded prayer card. The farmer swallowed his pride, then invited Carl to finish the shift. That evening the camp officer gathered both the workers and the guards. He read a simple rule. Every tool must be counted in the yard at the end of the day. Every man must be counted at the gate. No exceptions. The rule felt strict, yet it created calm. Men who feared insult now had a process that protected dignity on both sides. A week later, a different fire flared. 2 prisoners of war whispered to a shop girl during a delivery. Conversation was allowed if it was polite and brief. Flirtation was not. Word reached the village and the mood turned cold. The vicar asked the camp commandant for a meeting. They walked the lane with the farmers' union steward in the drizzle, and they wrote the second rule. No personal gifts. No private meetings. Greetings are welcome. Respect is required. The 2 men apologized in front of the work crew. The shop girl nodded and the street carried on. Conflict did not end. During a Sunday football match, a British farmhand slid hard into a German goalkeeper. Shouts rose like crows. Hands curled into fists. An older woman stepped from the sideline, raised a whistle, and blew once. She ran the women's land army team and she knew how to command a field. She spoke first to the British side. Then to the German side. Play the ball, not the man. Shake hands, start over, keep the game clean. The match resumed. When the prisoners of war walked back to the camp, they spoke about her all the way to the gate. Authority could be firm without rage. That idea surprised them more than the goal they later conceded. Soon the guards posted a new board inside the gate. It was plain wood with 4 lines. Count tools. Greet politely. No private gifts. Report grievances before sunset. The last line changed everything. Complaints could be spoken safely. Each evening a clerk in a wool vest sat with a ledger and asked the same questions. Who? What? When? What repair do you ask for? Not punishment. Repair. The word spread through the huts. When a fence board broke, it was fixed. When a rumor started, it was checked. When a man cursed in anger, he returned the next day with a proper apology. Not all fires could be cooled by rules. One dawn a trio cut the wire and ran toward the hedgerows. The alarm bell rang and boots hit mud. The patrol found them by a brook, shivering and exhausted. They did not resist. Back in camp the commandant faced them in the yard. He did not shout. He told the whole shift what would happen next. There would be no public humiliation. There would be work restrictions for a period of time. The men would lose recreation until harvest was secure. They would also sit with a village constable and a chaplain for 3 nights and listen. They would hear about ration cards, about sons at sea, about why the hedges were not a road home but a wall of grief for families who waited. The lesson bit deeper than a cell could have done. Another tension rose around pay. The prisoners of war earned vouchers. They wanted boots. The shopkeeper refused to sell leather to enemy labor. The camp clerk proposed a trade. Wool socks now. Boots after harvest, if the union agreed, and only from surplus stock. The union voted yes. The shopkeeper sold the socks and kept the boots until the grain was in. The prisoners of war worked harder than ever to earn what had been promised. When the boots finally crossed the counter, the shop bell sounded like a small victory for everyone. Ethics grew from habit. Guards learned to say please and thank you. Prisoners learned to return a lost pen without fanfare. Farmers learned to explain a task before they corrected a mistake. On Sundays the vicar invited any man who wished to listen to a short talk on duty and mercy. Some came for the tea. Some came for the warmth. Some came because the words were gentle and clear. Mercy is strongest when it is ordinary. By autumn the board at the gate held one more line. Honor work. Honor rest. A bell rings at dawn. A bell rings at dusk. Between the bells there will be fairness. Conflict still sparked. A gate stuck. A lad shouted. A man carried sorrow from a letter and snapped at a stranger. Yet the system held. Rules gave shape. Mediation gave voice. Small rituals made trust visible. The village did not forget the war and the camp did not forget captivity. But side by side, field by field, they learned how to live without hatred for one more day, and then for another, until the harvest was done. The bell of the village hall rings after sunset. The farm day is over, boots are muddy, hands are cold, but the room fills with men who take seats at long wooden tables. On the chalkboard the teacher writes simple English words. Good evening. My name is. I come from. The men repeat each line with careful voices. At first the sounds feel heavy, yet each word lands a little easier than the last. A kettle hisses. Someone pours tea. A farmer's daughter passes notebooks and stubby pencils. The hall smells of coal dust and soap. The teacher points to a map of Britain on the wall. He draws a line to the local town and another to the sea. He speaks slowly. He explains council elections, the idea of public debate, the role of the local newspaper. He does not shout. He does not threaten. He asks questions and waits for answers. The men are not used to this. They look at one another. Then one hand rises. Another follows. Voices begin to carry thoughts, not orders. The lesson moves from words to ideas. After class, the librarian unlocks a cabinet and lays out dictionaries, grammar guides, and thin paperbacks. A volunteer translates the first paragraphs. Some readers struggle. Others help. Laughter breaks out at a mispronounced phrase, not cruel laughter, but the kind that loosens fear. Outside the windows, a bicycle clicks past. Inside the hall, a sentence is built, then another. A man who never liked books whispers the new words again and again as if they are a password to a better version of himself. Sundays bring more than rest. In a church hall a local vicar invites questions about faith and forgiveness. A schoolteacher offers a talk on the history of Parliament and the rights of citizens. A nurse explains public health and the idea that care is owed to every person. The men listen hard. They compare this with what they were taught. They recall posters that mocked democracy as weak and divided. Now they see a village that argues without fear and then shakes hands and goes home in peace. One evening a crate of old newspapers arrives. Headlines from different weeks sit side by side and disagree. Editorials criticize leaders without punishment. Letters to the editor complain about shortages, about prices, about policy. Yet no one is arrested for it. A guard shrugs and says this is normal. The men are silent. The idea lands slowly, like snow on a field, quiet yet heavy. Choice is possible. Dissent is allowed. Truth can be tested. These thoughts do not leave the mind once they enter. On the farms the lessons continue. A farmer explains why he keeps records of yields and costs. He shows how a cooperative works, how neighbors share a binder twine order, how the bank manager will listen if you bring clear numbers. The men learn the words for ledger and invoice and interest. The farmer tells them that a business that respects its workers earns loyalty and speed. The men look at one another, and something unlocks. Language grows in layers. First comes the phrase for a tool or a field. Then comes a sentence for safety and weather. Then comes a question that reaches beyond work. What do you believe? What do you vote for? Why do you trust these rules? Each reply opens a door. The village school opens its library 2 nights a week. A hand-painted sign reads Adult Education. The classes fill fast. One table studies mechanics. Another studies bookkeeping. A third reads pages on history and law. There is no test at the end. The aim is confidence. A local council member visits the camp and speaks without notes. He says that power must answer questions. He invites sharp ones. The men ask about rationing and strikes and taxes. He answers plainly, even when the answer is not pretty. The room holds its breath. No one storms in to stop the talk. No one is punished for the question. The men who entered the hall with folded arms leave with heads tilted in thought. Letters home change as the months pass. At first they beg for news, for food, for proof that the family is alive. Later they describe the strange steadiness of this island and its people. They describe the village nurse who tells them how to set a broken finger. They describe the farmer who pays for a new boot sole without argument because a good worker must be safe. They describe a grocer who trusts a ledger more than a uniform. These small acts bend the metal of old beliefs. In the camp there are evening circles where men read aloud from a book of simple English stories. A quiet man stands to speak about a line that stays with him. Another admits that he had never questioned a poster in his life. A third says he wants to open a workshop after the war. He asks how a small firm can win contracts. The teacher smiles and draws 3 words on the board. Skill. Trust. Records. The chalk taps. The room is a forge. Ideas are being hammered into tools. There are difficult moments. A radio from home carries news of ruins and hunger. Anger rises in the chest. The men fall silent and stare at the floor. The teacher does not argue. He lets the room breathe. Then he suggests one task. Write one plan for one thing you can build or repair when you return. A plow. A roof truss. A water pump. The mood shifts from despair to purpose. Pencils move across paper. Futures take shape. By spring the village invites the men to a small exhibition in the school gym. There are displays of repaired engines and neat logbooks. There is a table with vocabulary lists and little dialogues. A boy reads a short welcome. A guard stands by the door and does not interrupt. The headmistress shakes hands with each man and says well done and good luck. The applause is soft and real. Education has done what walls and wires cannot do. It has loosened fear. It has turned strangers into neighbors. It has placed new language in old mouths and new values in old hearts. When the order to repatriate finally comes, the men pack their few things, and they also carry something that no guard can count. They carry a way of seeing the world. They carry the belief that skill and fairness and open debate can rebuild a life. They step toward the pier with a different stride. They are still the same men, yet they are not the same. The war is ending, and the news arrives in fragments carried by letters, whispers, and the wireless in village kitchens. The German prisoners hear it first from farmers who pause at the hedge and say that the front has moved again. The fields do not stop. The men lift milk churns, mend fences, and gather eggs while their thoughts run ahead to a ruined homeland. At evening mess there is a hush that feels like a storm about to break. Some men study English phrases more intently. Others stare at their hands, remembering faces they have not seen for years. The camp loudspeaker reads official statements in measured tones. Words like surrender and ceasefire float above the barbed wire and settle in every chest. Work details continue, but they move with a tug of urgency. A tractor stalls and 3 prisoners fix it without a word, each one thinking of a different road home. Permission slips for chapel services and library time are signed faster than before. A teacher from the village visits and offers a short lesson on how local councils rebuild bridges and schools. The lesson is quiet and practical. The message is clear. There will be much to repair, both bricks and souls. At lights out the Baroque whispers turn to plans. A baker wants to return and reopen a small shop. A mechanic wants to bring British safety routines to a workshop back in Germany. A shy young man admits that he wishes to write letters to the farmer who treated him like a son. The next morning a sergeant gathers the men and explains the repatriation steps. Medical checks. Identity confirmation. Work record summaries. Short courses for carpentry, plow adjustment, and bookkeeping. The men listen with a steady concentration that would have been unthinkable when they first arrived. After duty a group plays football with village youths. Someone slips a simple thank you note into a pocket. The ball arcs high against a clean spring sky. The crowd claps. No one mentions ideology. Everyone understands that the match is about belonging, even if the belonging is temporary. As the convoys are planned, the camp opens new classrooms. There is a map of post-war Europe on the wall and a list of civic words on the blackboard. Ballot, council, permit, budget. The instructor shows how a town agrees on a water line and how citizens argue without fear. The lesson lands with force. Many prisoners have only known orders shouted from above. Now they copy the words carefully. They imagine village meetings in places where roofs are missing and streets are broken, and yet people will still gather to decide how to live. In the yard the quartermaster issues tool kits for those who will return to farming. Small wrenches. Oil cans. Seed charts. Each item says the same thing. Build. Repair. Begin. Farewells come in a rush. A farmer brings a basket with bread, cheese, and apples. A child brings a drawing of a tractor with two smiling figures. The camp chaplain speaks of forgiveness, which is not forgetting, and hope, which is not naivety. The final evening feels like the last page of a long book. There is a song, quiet and steady, about roads and mornings. At dawn the lorries arrive. The prisoners line up with bundles and letters. Handshakes are awkward and strong. Eyes are wet and unashamed. Some men ask permission to write back once they have an address. The guards nod. The gates open. Wheels turn on gravel. The journey home passes hedgerows and mills and stations where porters tip their caps. The landscape looks ordered and abundant, and the men carry that image with them like a lantern against the ruins they expect to find. On the ship they talk about small plans. A clean well. A bread oven. A room for a library. They promise to keep the habits they learned. Work safely. Speak honestly. Help the neighbor first. When the coastline fades the future is still uncertain, but the choice has been made. They will return as sons and brothers and also as students of a hard lesson. Community is not an accident. It is a craft. It is a harvest. And if they plant it with patience, it will grow again. The war ended, but the story of the prisoners did not. Many German prisoners who had worked on British farms returned home with new habits, new skills, and new ways of thinking. They had seen how a village could run on trust, how a harvest could be a shared effort, and how a handshake could be as binding as an order from a superior. Letters began to cross the sea. A farmer in Kent wrote to a former prisoner in Hanover about the spring planting. A mason from Bavaria sent thanks for a winter coat that a Welsh family had mailed. These letters carried more than greetings. They carried a model of life based on cooperation and dignity. Some men came back to ruined towns and empty workshops. They rebuilt using ideas learned in Britain. They formed cooperatives to pool seed and tools. They scheduled workdays the way British farmers had shown them, with simple charts and clear roles. A few started evening classes in sheds and church halls. They taught basic English, bookkeeping, and the operation of tractors. They repeated phrases they had heard in Britain. Plan the work. Share the burden. Pay on time. Trust the team. Not every return was smooth. Some neighbors distrusted the talk about fairness and shared decisions. Some called it weakness. The former prisoners argued that fairness made work faster and safer. They pointed to the yield of new wheat fields. They showed the savings from shared repair of machines. They stood by the new methods through a stubborn season and won respect when the harvest came in strong. Marriages and migrations followed. A handful of men married British women they had met at markets and chapels. Some families moved to Britain and opened small businesses near the very farms where they had once labored under guard. Others remained in Germany but kept up the friendships. Parcels went back and forth. Jams and knitted scarves went east in winter. Coffee and tinned meat went west when money was short. The exchange made a bridge that politics could not shake. Memory took root in public places. A parish planted an oak for the men who had helped bring in the crops of 1945 and 1946. A German town mounted a small plaque on the wall of its rebuilt school to thank the British charity that had sent books. Former prisoners spoke in classrooms. They did not hide the dark parts. They described hunger, fear, and the first hard days of captivity. They also described the first cup of hot tea in a farmhouse kitchen and the silent decision to treat strangers as workers and neighbors. Children listened and asked careful questions. The answers were steady and kind. Violence breaks quickly. Community heals slowly. Work done together heals fastest. In the early 1950s the exchanges deepened. Farm cooperatives on both sides traded advice on crop rotation and dairy sanitation. Mechanics swapped notes on tractor fuel and cold starts. Local councils compared methods for housing and road repair. The former prisoners stood as interpreters. They knew both languages and both tempers. They knew when to pause for tea and when to push for a decision. Projects that might have stalled began to move. A bridge was repaired before winter. A grain dryer was installed before the late harvest. A training program produced a class of millers who reduced waste and raised quality. The greatest change took place inside the men themselves. Many had marched into captivity with narrow pride. They now measured pride by service. They praised punctual pay. They praised clean accounts. They praised a rule that protected the weak without shaming the strong. A few entered local politics and pressed for fair land leases and transparent tenders. Others stayed on the land but kept the same spirit. When storms hit, they shared fuel and labor. When prices fell, they shared trucks to reach a larger market. They treated a rival as a future partner. They had learned that enemies can become neighbors if the work is honest and the rules are clear. Reunions began. A village hall in Yorkshire set out long tables and brought in a gramophone. Photographs of harvest crews lined the walls. Men in their 60s found the faces they had known as boys. They spoke slowly at first, then faster, as memories rose like a fresh wind. A pastor offered a short prayer for the dead and a longer thanks for the living. Someone passed around a ledger with the old wage marks and signatures. The room fell quiet. Then came laughter, and the rattle of teacups, and the soft thud of hands meeting across the years. The legacy was simple and strong. Work can change the heart. Courtesy can change a town. A steady wage and a fair contract can change a nation. The story of the prisoners in Britain proved that mercy is not weakness. It is a tool as real as a plow. It makes straight lines in rough ground. It turns strangers into partners. It turns fear into a plan. The men who once arrived under guard left with a purpose. Build. Share. Teach. Remember. Their children and grandchildren kept the letters and the photographs. They told the story at tables and in fields. They summed it up in one lesson. Freedom is not only the right to stand alone. Freedom is also the strength to stand together. Morning on the submarine begins without sunlight. It begins with the soft knock of the bosun and a quiet word that rolls through steel. Wake rotation. The narrow passage stirs. A sailor slides from a warm bunk and another takes his place before the mattress cools. The air is thick with oil, metal, and salt. Condensation beads on the periscope column and falls to the deck like slow rain. Space is a puzzle that never stops moving. Elbows turn sideways, shoulders tuck, tools pass hand to hand. Nothing is wasted. Not time. Not motion. Not breath. Red lamps bloom in the central post. Dials glow with patient numbers. The captain reads the night log. Course and weather. Battery charge. Fuel and fresh water. The executive officer outlines the next 6 hours. A short surface window if clouds allow it. Ventilation and charge if they do. The helmsman warms stiff fingers on a cup. The plainsman runs through the checklist under his breath. In the galley a pot balances between pipes. Coffee rises like a small rescue. Bread and cheese follow. No one lingers. The first watch takes stations. Helm. Planes. Hydrophone. Central post. Battery room. Diesel engines. Ventilation. A rhythm settles over the hull. The hydrophone operator lowers his head and listens to the ocean as if it were a breathing animal. Hiss of swell. Distant screws. Nothing close. The captain nods and gives the word to prepare. Hatches open fully and the deck drinks wind. Diesel engines catch with a clean strike and a steady pulse runs the length of the hull. Ventilation comes alive. Stale breath leaves and cold air enters. Compressors drive hard into the bottles. Batteries draw from the generators and the needle climbs the scale one slow mark at a time. The messenger moves from bow to stern with short reports. Gauges in the green. Cooking flame low. Hydrophone clear. The captain allows 5 minutes more and no longer. Dive stations. The word travels like a wave against steel. Hatches seal. Diesel engines stop. The electric motors take the load with a soft growl that feels like a hand on the back. Numbers settle in the central post. 5 meters. 10. 15. Trim holds. The periscope slides under and the sea places its heavy hand on the hull. The crew breathes as one lung. The hydrophone operator begins his slow harvest of sound. Far screw. Merchant. Bearing steady. Destroyer faint. Speed increasing. The captain listens and answers in even lines. Discipline shapes every motion. A mechanic ties back a sleeve so fabric will not brush a valve wheel. A steward folds cloth around a pan to keep it from wringing. A sailor learns the sideways step that passes a man in the corridor without a touch. The cook works under dark routine. Small flame. Little steam. Gentle lids. The taste of the meal matters. The smoke and smell matter more. The executive officer walks the length of the passage and counts by feel. Hinges smooth. Dawn is only a rumor above the swells when the order comes to surface. The submarine rises through the gray water, hatch wheels turn, and a ribbon of cold air spills down the ladder. The diesel engines come alive with a deep rolling growl. The deck trembles. Charge men move to their panels and begin the ritual of the charge. Heavy cables hum. Needles climb. The batteries wake like a buried heart that must be fed before the next descent. Fresh air floods the boat. Ventilators spin. Moisture that clung to every pipe begins to lift. Men breathe deeper, shoulders loosen, voices return to normal tones. The compressors take their turn and fill the air flasks for ballast work. The chief of the engine room walks the line of gauges. Fuel, oil, coolant, exhaust temperature, all steady. A lookout wipes salt from his eyes and scans the horizon. He watches the sky as much as the sea. Clouds mean shelter. Clear skies mean danger. Somewhere beyond that line is a patrol plane with a radar set that sees farther than any human eye. Energy is time, and time is safety. The captain knows it. He asks for a target state for the batteries. The chief answers with a number and a promise. We will reach it if the sea stays kind and the sky stays empty. To protect the charge they throttle the engines to a steady pace. Not too hard. Not too soft. The propeller note must not carry. The cook keeps heat low so the vents do not announce the boat. Even breakfast becomes part of the energy plan. A signalman brings a radio slip. The message is short. Shipping lanes have shifted. Patrols have increased. The captain folds the paper and stares at the sea. Then he gives quiet orders. We will hold the surface a little longer. We will breathe while we can. We will store every watt that the night allows. Men rotate through the bridge for a taste of wind. Each man stands for a minute. Then he goes back to the warm metal lungs below. The charge climbs. The smell of diesel is everywhere. It means power. It also means risk. The horizon is still empty. The sky loses color as the sun reaches the clouds. The captain nods once. The time for breathing is over. The time for silence returns. Hatches close. Vent covers lock. The engines cease with a last shudder and the boat slides down into the weight of the sea. The world narrows to steel, current, breath, and will. Electric motors take the load with a smooth rising note. The battery meters step down from full glory to careful use. Every switch is a decision. Lights dim to conserve power. Only red lamps glow in the control room. Fans slow. Pumps wait for permission. The boat changes from a sprinting animal to a gliding one. Men lower their voices. Boots move softly. Even a dropped spoon can feel like a shout. Air begins its long voyage through the closed loop. Carbon dioxide creeps upward. The crew feels it before the instruments confirm it. Heads ache. Chests feel heavy. The petty officer of the watch brings out the regeneration canisters. The chemical cakes will capture the carbon dioxide and return a little grace to the lungs of the boat. The chief medic checks the oxygen bottles. He gives a slow, measured addition to the mix. Too little, the crew will fade. Too much, a spark becomes a danger. Balance is survival. Speed means life in some moments, but here it means hunger. At high speed the motors drain the batteries like a storm drinks a river. At slow speed the boat becomes a shadow. The captain chooses the shadow. He studies the drift, the currents, and the last known position. He trusts his navigator and the sense of the helmsman's hands. He orders a turn by 1 degree. It is a small thing. It saves miles and hours. Sweat beads on cold steel. Water gathers and falls in tiny drops. The submarine breathes with its people. They rotate through quiet tasks. Log entries. Valve checks. Listening watches. The hydrophone operator sits in a cocoon of patience and hears a world the eye cannot see. Far away, propellers murmur like a distant city. Closer, there is only the soft song of water on the hull. That is good. That is safety. Time stretches. The battery meters sink again. The boat must one day return to the air. Not yet. Clouds are building above. Night will come. The captain sketches a plan with his finger on the chart table. A short rise. A short charge. A short taste of wind. Then down again. The crew nods. Everyone understands the cycle. Breathe. Store. Hide. Repeat. The submarine settles deeper by a whisper. The sea holds it close. The men close their eyes and listen to the motors. The energy they saved in darkness now carries them forward. It is enough. For now. Morning on the submarine does not begin with sunrise. It begins when the watch bell and a quiet word roll through the narrow passage. Men slide from warm bunks and another crewman immediately takes the same place. The galley is no larger than a closet, yet it becomes the heart of the boat. The cook balances a pot on a swaying stove, counts every spoon of coffee, and chooses which food must be used before it spoils. Early in the patrol there are eggs, onions, fresh bread, and fruit tucked into every spare corner between pipes and torpedoes. Later there are tins, hard biscuits, cured meat, and cheese. Cold lockers are small, so the menu is a puzzle the cook solves each day. He manages steam and smells because the ventilation must stay quiet. A strong odor can ride the air like a signal. Water is more precious than fuel. Faces are washed with a few careful splashes. Clothes dry slowly and carry the salt of days. The air tastes of oil, metal, and the faint sting of the chemical canisters that pull carbon dioxide from every breath. Condensation collects on valves and handrails and falls in fat drops. The crew learns to move like shadows. No clatter of pans, no careless step on a loose grate, no echoing laugh. Every sound is a risk when escorts sweep the ocean with keen ears. Meals are staggered so stations are never empty. A bowl of stew, a cut of sausage, a heel of bread, and a chipped mug of coffee travel hand to hand. Men eat standing or perched on storage boxes. Conversation is low and plain. Someone tells a small memory of home and the crew smiles without showing teeth. The routine itself is a shield. Check the vents. Check the bilge. Check the fuse box. Wipe the periscope tube. Oil the door latches. Each task is a stitch that holds the crew together. In the control room the hydrophonist closes his eyes and listens. Far away there is a murmur like distant thunder. It grows and divides into many notes. A convoy. Transports, escorts, and the churning of many screws. The commander marks a cautious line on the chart. The boat will wait, drift, and breathe as little as possible. The cook lowers the flame and the crew lowers their voices. The day tightens like a belt on an empty stomach. Midday feels like evening because time bends under pressure. The crew cycles through duty and rest in short turns that never match the clock on land. Fatigue is a tide that washes over everyone. To resist it, the boat runs on rituals. After the noon meal, a torpedo man checks seals and wires with the patience of a watchmaker. A machinist lays a hand on a warm casing and feels for an unhealthy tremble. A signalman reads a faded booklet for 10 minutes, closes it, and passes it to the next man. These small acts are not leisure. They are anchors for the mind. The cook serves a second hot meal when the commander allows the stove to flare. It is a gift as much as food. A little pepper wakes dull tongues. A sliver of chocolate is split into equal parts. For a moment the crew leans against the same memory of normal life. Then the sound of the ocean returns and the moment is folded away. Letters from home are read until the paper softens. Some men keep a stub of pencil and write replies that will reach land much later or not at all. The words still matter. They remind a man that he is more than a number on a roster and more than a pair of hands at a valve. Fear rises and falls with the convoy noise. When the escort screws grow louder, the boat becomes a chapel. The commander whispers orders. The engineer cuts one more light. Boots lift and set down like feathers. The mind learns to ride the swell of dread and not break. Breath by breath, the crew holds its shape. Night brings no darkness under the sea, only a deeper patience. The boat might surface for fresh air and charging. Or it might wait, still and blind, while enemy radars sweep the waves above. In that waiting the crew finds its balance. Work. Eat. Rest. Listen. Repeat. The meal is fuel for muscle and spirit. The routine is armor for thought. The fear is real, but so is the bond. By the time the next watch begins, every man knows his place in the narrow world of steel and salt, and the submarine is ready to endure one more hour beneath the Atlantic. The contact begins as a faint shiver in the headphones. The hydrophone operator raises a hand and the control room becomes still. A distant choir of propellers moves through the hull. Different pitches and different rhythms mean a convoy. The commander speaks softly. Reduce speed. Maintain silence. The submarine glides ahead on the lowest power that will still answer the helm. The navigator marks bearings in a damp log under a red lamp. Periscope depth. Ballast valves whisper and the sea climbs over the glass. The periscope rises like a careful finger and breaks the surface for a single breath. It turns once and turns again. In the lens freighters lift and fall in the swell. Far on the flank two lean shapes cut the water. Those are escorts. The sky is low and the wind tears foam from the crests. Broken light is our ally. The scope goes down. Hold depth and hold course. We shape an intercept. The plan is simple. Angle across the track. Choose the largest cargo ship. Fire a narrow spread. Turn away under silent motors. Slide below the layer where sound will bend and hide us. The torpedo officer nods. Tubes 1, 2 and 3 are ready. The stern tube stands by. The electrician watches the battery board like a beating heart. The hydrophone operator calls new bearings in a calm voice. The song of the convoy grows clearer. A slow throb marks a freighter. The commander risks one more look. Range is closing. Angle on bow is favorable. Set running depth for a strike under the keel. Set the spread tight. We cannot waste a single engine. Data flows in short phrases. Bearing. Range. Speed. Gyro angle. The torpedo calculator ticks. The room becomes a quiet hive. Hands move. Valve seat. Levers stop. The command comes without drama. Stand by to fire. Open the outer doors. Mark. Fire 1. Fire 2. Fire 3. Compressed air exhales. The boat shivers. The crew holds breath. The periscope dips. We wait in the sound of the motors. The hull is steady like a held breath. Time stretches into a wire. Nothing happens. Then the wire snaps. A dull strike moves through the hull. Another follows after a count of heartbeats. Metal groans. Water roars. The hydrophone erupts with noise. Freighters turn. Escorts race to full power. The commander does not celebrate. He does not look again. Dive. Silent running. Below the layer. Motors ease to the lowest setting. Lights fall to red. Voices fade to whispers. The first pattern of depth charges arrives like a closing fist. Blows pass from bow to stern and shake dust from every beam. Tools rattle and then fall still as hands grip them tight. The helmsman holds depth with a touch as thin as paper. The engineer cuts non-essential circuits. The escorts circle and listen. A second pattern walks across the sea. The hull shudders but holds. On the chart the commander shifts course and depth in small steps. Small moves break the enemy plot. Now the sea begins to hide us. The thermocline bends sound. The listener whispers new bearings. An escort is close on the starboard quarter. Its propellers bite hard. Then the tone slides away. We freeze for a minute. Another escort rakes the water astern. The charges fall short. The commander uses the noise to drift across the wake and down into darker water. Battery draw is steady. An hour crawls by. The explosions fade and stop. Only the distant heartbeat of the convoy remains. The commander allows power to rise by a breath. We hold the new course. Periscope depth is too risky. We trust the listener. He calls the last bearing. It is opening. Maintain silence for 5 minutes. Then we ease the bow toward the wind and away from the track. In the torpedo room, men wipe the guides and dog the caps. The navigator notes the times of impact. The crew exhales as one body. No cheer. Only a return to work. Above us the night closes over the convoy. For now we keep a quiet promise to the sea. Move softly. End the contact. Prepare for tomorrow. Silence returns in small waves. The echoes of the last explosions fade into the hull like distant thunder. The crew waits in a held breath, then returns to motion with careful purpose. The engineer leads a slow walk through the compartments. Valves are touched. Seals are checked. A thin line of moisture on a flange is wiped and watched. A loose bolt is tightened with the gentlest turn so the sound does not carry. Electric relays click like small hearts. Insulation feels dry. Cables are tied back into neat lines. In the torpedo room, men move with a measured rhythm, sliding a heavy cylinder along rails with blocks and tackle, whispering the count, guiding the steel with gloved hands. The cook lights the small stove and builds a simple meal. It is not a feast, but heat in a bowl steadies the mind. The commander writes in the log by the red lamp. Range to target. Angle on the bow. Time from firing to the first detonation. Pattern of the counterattack. He is already thinking of the next encounter. He knows the enemy learns quickly. He knows this ocean changes by the hour. When the hull is quiet again, a meeting begins in low voices. They speak of lessons. The first spread traveled as planned, but the second fish ran long. The escort reacted faster than expected. The depth settings of the charges suggest a new doctrine. The sonar of the escort seemed to lock, then lose, then lock again. Perhaps the thermal layer saved them. Perhaps it did not. The crew listens and nods. Each man leaves with one clear change to his routine. A rag under a rattling tool. A new way to brace a locker. A new hand signal to replace a spoken word. Morale does not arrive with cheering. It arrives with order. The men smile without showing teeth. They trade a quiet joke. They lean on the familiar. The smell of oil. The creak of rope. The thrum of the batteries drawing down. Above them the night is wide and cold. Somewhere beyond that darkness radar sets sweep the sea. Somewhere an aircraft circles with a steady beam the human eye cannot see. The submarine waits and breathes like a living thing. It must live through one more cycle. Charge. Dive. Hide. Hunt. The commander studies the chart. He chooses a point for the next rise to the surface. He wants cloud cover. He wants wind from the quarter that makes a small chop. He wants distance from the last attack, but not so far that the new course loses the lanes of the convoy. At the right moment ballast tanks are adjusted. The boat eases upward until the periscope depth reveals a restless roof of water. Nothing but waves. Nothing but wind. The order is given. Surface for a short time. Hatches open. Cool air rushes in and tastes like a memory of land. Diesel engines bark to life, then settle into a deep animal growl. Generators take the load. The batteries begin to drink. On deck, lookouts scan every point of the compass. The man at the radio listens and sends for only heartbeats at a time. High-frequency direction finding is a hunter that never sleeps. The boat keeps its message short. No chatter. No repeats. Down below the fans spin up. The air clears. Shoulders loosen. A pot of coffee travels hand to hand. The cook grins for the first time today. Then the clock turns again. A faint contact on the horizon could be spray or could be a patrol aircraft. A ghost on the set could be clutter or could be the first blink of a searching pulse. The commander does not gamble. The order comes like a bell. Dive. Hatches slam. Valves shift. Water floods the ballast. The angle changes. The sea closes over the sail. Diesel gives way to the whisper of electric motors. Lamps dim to the deep glow of night. The crew returns to the long discipline. Silence in every motion. Breath held a little shorter. The submarine slides beneath the layer where sound bends and loses itself. Down here the day begins again. Repairs are complete. Torpedoes are ready. The batteries hold enough promise for another hunt. Fear is present, but it is shaped and named and placed in a corner. In its place stands resolve. The men think of home, and then they let the thought go. The ocean is their world now. One more hour to the patrol line. One more test of nerve and craft. A new day rises in the dark, and the boat prepares to meet it. The contact begins as a faint shiver in the headphones. The hydrophone operator raises a hand and the control room becomes still. A distant choir of propellers moves through the hull. Different pitches and different rhythms mean a convoy. The commander speaks softly. Reduce speed. Maintain silence. The submarine glides ahead on the lowest power that will still answer the helm. The navigator marks bearings in a damp log under a red lamp. Periscope depth. Ballast valves whisper and the sea climbs over the glass. The periscope rises like a careful finger and breaks the surface for a single breath. It turns once and turns again. In the lens freighters lift and fall in the swell. Far on the flank two lean shapes cut the water. Those are escorts. The sky is low and the wind tears foam from the crests. Broken light is our ally. The scope goes down. Hold depth and hold course. We shape an intercept. The plan is simple. Angle across the track. Choose the largest cargo ship. Fire a narrow spread. Turn away under silent motors. Slide below the layer where sound will bend and hide us. The torpedo officer nods. Tubes 1, 2 and 3 are ready. The stern tube stands by. The electrician watches the battery board like a beating heart. The hydrophone operator calls new bearings in a calm voice. The song of the convoy grows clearer. A slow throb marks a freighter. The commander risks one more look. Range is closing. Angle on bow is favorable. Set running depth for a strike under the keel. Set the spread tight. We cannot waste a single engine. Data flows in short phrases. Bearing. Range. Speed. Gyro angle. The torpedo calculator ticks. The room becomes a quiet hive. Hands move. Valve seat. Levers stop. The command comes without drama. Stand by to fire. Open the outer doors. Mark. Fire 1. Fire 2. Fire 3. Compressed air exhales. The boat shivers. The crew holds breath. The periscope dips. We wait in the sound of the motors. The hull is steady like a held breath. Time stretches into a wire. Nothing happens. Then the wire snaps. A dull strike moves through the hull. Another follows after a count of heartbeats. Metal groans. Water roars. The hydrophone erupts with noise. Freighters turn. Escorts race to full power. The commander does not celebrate. He does not look again. Dive. Silent running. Below the layer. Motors ease to the lowest setting. Lights fall to red. Voices fade to whispers. The first pattern of depth charges arrives like a closing fist. Blows pass from bow to stern and shake dust from every beam. Tools rattle and then fall still as hands grip them tight. The helmsman holds depth with a touch as thin as paper. The engineer cuts non-essential circuits. The escorts circle and listen. A second pattern walks across the sea. The hull shudders but holds. On the chart the commander shifts course and depth in small steps. Small moves break the enemy plot. Now the sea begins to hide us. The thermocline bends sound. The listener whispers new bearings. An escort is close on the starboard quarter. Its propellers bite hard. Then the tone slides away. We freeze for a minute. Another escort rakes the water astern. The charges fall short. The commander uses the noise to drift across the wake and down into darker water. Battery draw is steady. An hour crawls by. The explosions fade and stop. Only the distant heartbeat of the convoy remains. The commander allows power to rise by a breath. We hold the new course. Periscope depth is too risky. We trust the listener. He calls the last bearing. It is opening. Maintain silence for 5 minutes. Then we ease the bow toward the wind and away from the track. In the torpedo room men wipe the guides and dog the caps. The navigator notes the times of impact. The crew exhales as one body. No cheer. Only a return to work. Above us the night closes over the convoy. For now we keep a quiet promise to the sea. Move softly. End the contact. Prepare for tomorrow. Silence returns in small waves. The echoes of the last explosions fade into the hull like distant thunder. The crew waits in a held breath, then returns to motion with careful purpose. The engineer leads a slow walk through the compartments. Valves are touched. Seals are checked. A thin line of moisture on a flange is wiped and watched. A loose bolt is tightened with the gentlest turn so the sound does not carry. Electric relays click like small hearts. Insulation feels dry. Cables are tied back into neat lines. In the torpedo room men move with a measured rhythm, sliding a heavy cylinder along rails with blocks and tackle, whispering the count, guiding the steel with gloved hands. The cook lights the small stove and builds a simple meal. It is not a feast, but heat in a bowl steadies the mind. The commander writes in the log by the red lamp. Range to target. Angle on the bow. Time from firing to the first detonation. Pattern of the counterattack. He is already thinking of the next encounter. He knows the enemy learns quickly. He knows this ocean changes by the hour. When the hull is quiet again a meeting begins in low voices. They speak of lessons. The first spread traveled as planned, but the second fish ran long. The escort reacted faster than expected. The depth settings of the charges suggest a new doctrine. The sonar of the escort seemed to lock, then lose, then lock again. Perhaps the thermal layer saved them. Perhaps it did not. The crew listens and nods. Each man leaves with one clear change to his routine. A rag under a rattling tool. A new way to brace a locker. A new hand signal to replace a spoken word. Morale does not arrive with cheering. It arrives with order. The men smile without showing teeth. They trade a quiet joke. They lean on the familiar. The smell of oil. The creak of rope. The thrum of the batteries drawing down. Above them the night is wide and cold. Somewhere beyond that darkness radar sets sweep the sea. Somewhere an aircraft circles with a steady beam the human eye cannot see. The submarine waits and breathes like a living thing. It must live through one more cycle. Charge. Dive. Hide. Hunt. The commander studies the chart. He chooses a point for the next rise to the surface. He wants cloud cover. He wants wind from the quarter that makes a small chop. He wants distance from the last attack, but not so far that the new course loses the lanes of the convoy. At the right moment ballast tanks are adjusted. The boat eases upward until the periscope depth reveals a restless roof of water. Nothing but waves. Nothing but wind. The order is given. Surface for a short time. Hatches open. Cool air rushes in and tastes like a memory of land. Diesel engines bark to life, then settle into a deep animal growl. Generators take the load. The batteries begin to drink. On deck, lookouts scan every point of the compass. The man at the radio listens and sends for only heartbeats at a time. High-frequency direction finding is a hunter that never sleeps. The boat keeps its message short. No chatter. No repeats. Down below the fans spin up. The air clears. Shoulders loosen. A pot of coffee travels hand to hand. The cook grins for the first time today. Then the clock turns again. A faint contact on the horizon could be spray or could be a patrol aircraft. A ghost on the set could be clutter or could be the first blink of a searching pulse. The commander does not gamble. The order comes like a bell. Dive. Hatches slam. Valves shift. Water floods the ballast. The angle changes. The sea closes over the sail. Diesel gives way to the whisper of electric motors. Lamps dim to the deep glow of night. The crew returns to the long discipline. Silence in every motion. Breath held a little shorter. The submarine slides beneath the layer where sound bends and loses itself. Down here the day begins again. Repairs are complete. Torpedoes are ready. The batteries hold enough promise for another hunt. Fear is present, but it is shaped and named and placed in a corner. In its place stands resolve. The men think of home, and then they let the thought go. The ocean is their world now. One more hour to the patrol line. One more test of nerve and craft. A new day rises in the dark, and the boat prepares to meet it. The commander studies the chart. He chooses a point for the next rise to the surface. He wants cloud cover. He wants wind from the quarter that makes a small chop. He wants distance from the last attack, but not so far that the new course loses the lanes of the convoy. At the right moment ballast tanks are adjusted. The boat eases upward until the periscope depth reveals a restless roof of water. Nothing but waves. Nothing but wind. The order is given. Surface for a short time. Hatches open. Cool air rushes in and tastes like a memory of land. Diesel engines bark to life, then settle into a deep animal growl. Generators take the load. The batteries begin to drink. On deck, lookouts scan every point of the compass. The man at the radio listens and sends for only heartbeats at a time. High-frequency direction finding is a hunter that never sleeps. The boat keeps its message short. No chatter. No repeats. Down below the fans spin up. The air clears. Shoulders loosen. A pot of coffee travels hand to hand. The cook grins for the first time today. Then the clock turns again. A faint contact on the horizon could be spray or could be a patrol aircraft. A ghost on the set could be clutter or could be the first blink of a searching pulse. The commander does not gamble. The order comes like a bell. Dive. Hatches slam. Valves shift. Water floods the ballast. The angle changes. The sea closes over the sail. Diesel gives way to the whisper of electric motors. Lamps dim to the deep glow of night. The crew returns to the long discipline. Silence in every motion. Breath held a little shorter. The submarine slides beneath the layer where sound bends and loses itself. Down here the day begins again. Repairs are complete. Torpedoes are ready. The batteries hold enough promise for another hunt. Fear is present, but it is shaped and named and placed in a corner. In its place stands resolve. The men think of home, and then they let the thought go. The ocean is their world now. One more hour to the patrol line. One more test of nerve and craft. A new day rises in the dark, and the boat prepares to meet it. Midnight over the Pacific. The sea is quiet, but the air is full of secrets. Somewhere beyond the horizon a carrier group is moving through black water. On one bridge a young officer watches a glass screen where a pale echo crawls across the circle of light. He whispers one word. Contact. Far away, a scout plane is still miles from the fleet, yet the ships already know he is coming. Before the pilot sees a shadow, before he hears an engine, the fleet has changed course, launched night fighters, and raised the guns. The enemy believes the dark is safety. The enemy is wrong. That is the hook of this story. The invisible war of radiolocation began long before the first bomb fell, and it decided who would strike first, who would survive the night, and who would never reach the target. In this episode we explore how the Empire of Japan had promising radiolocation sets and skilled scientists, yet failed to turn innovation into scale. We follow the chain from laboratory to ship to coastline, and we watch it break at every weak link. Factories lacked copper, precision valves, and magnetrons. Training schools could not grow enough technicians. Commanders argued over doctrine while runways and bridges burned. Meanwhile the United States and the Commonwealth turned radiolocation into a habit. Destroyers sailed with sets as basic gear. Escort carriers scanned the sky every minute. Fighter direction became a language every sailor spoke. The result was not a single miracle device. The result was a living network that stretched from picket ships to island stations to plotting rooms and finally to the pilot's ear. When a formation appeared, the network reacted like a body with perfect reflexes. Eyes saw. Nerves signaled. Hands moved. And the blow landed first. Let us begin with the promise. Japanese engineers built early warning sets on the coast and fire control sets for ships. Prototypes worked. Demonstrations impressed. Yet the numbers stayed small. A cruiser might sail with one temperamental set. A squadron might share a single station that failed when parts cracked under heat or salt. The idea was sound. The ecosystem was missing. Without mass production there were not enough spares. Without spares there was fear of failure. Without confidence commanders kept old tactics. Night interception remained rare. Surprise remained common. Every missing set was not just a dark screen. It was a lost minute. A lost course change. A lost chance to live. Now picture a different night. A picket destroyer watches its scope. A blip blooms and the operator calls bearing and distance with calm precision. The message jumps to the fighter director. The director speaks to a pair of night fighters. Vector 320. Angel 6. The pilot's turn. On the carrier deck men roll bombs to the edge and secure fuel lines. The task force bends away into darkness while the fighters climb to meet the raiders. The enemy keeps faith with the moon and with luck. The defenders keep faith with numbers, training, and discipline. When the first tracer arcs across the sky, the battle is already decided by everything that happened in the last 5 minutes. Why did the Empire of Japan not flood its fleets and its islands with radiolocation? The answers are hard and human. Strategic bombing tore holes in supply chains. Nickel, copper, and high-grade glass were rationed. Electronics factories were small and scattered. Skilled workers were drafted faster than schools could replace them. Rival branches fought for the same materials. Naval leaders prized bold pilots more than quiet operators. Each choice made sense in the moment. Together they formed a pattern that strangled scale. A network is only as strong as the dull pieces that repeat by the thousand. Switches. Cables. Training manuals. Spare tubes in labeled crates. The United States and its allies built that dull greatness. The Empire of Japan never did. In the next chapters we will test the counterfactual. What if every destroyer had carried reliable sets? What if every airfield had trained controllers with steady power and clear procedures? Losses would have risen for attacking bombers. More night interceptions would have succeeded. Yet the final balance still leans toward the side that mastered production and training. Radiolocation was not a magic wand. It was a multiplier. When tied to escorts, to convoys, to disciplined pilots, it became the silent hand that moved the battle where one side wanted it. Tonight we have seen how the invisible war began. Next we will look at engines that promised to outrun the storm. Jets and rockets. Dreams that roared on paper but starved in the real world. Imagine a runway near Tokyo in late 1944. Sirens fade. Searchlights sweep the clouds. A small jet with swept wings rolls forward. Its name is Nakajima Kika. Its engine is called Na-20. Ground crew hold their breath. The pilot opens the throttle. For a heartbeat, the future of Japanese air power seems to lift from the concrete. That is the hook. Could a fast jet or a rocket interceptor have stopped the night raids and the day raids that turned cities to ash? The answer is a story of speed, courage, and a dream without fuel. The engineers knew the enemy had altitude and range. The bombers called B-29 flew higher and faster than most fighters could reach. A conventional response looked hopeless. So a handful of bold teams sketched a different sky. One team pursued a compact twin-intake jet inspired by the Messerschmitt 262. They called it Kika, the Orange Blossom. Another team chased an even more radical solution. A point defense rocket interceptor called J-8M Shusui, the Sharp Sword, launched to claw upward in one blazing climb, fire a short burst, and glide back to land. On paper both ideas looked like lightning in a bottle. Reality pushed back. The Na-20 engine demanded heat-resistant alloys, precision bearings, and perfect turbine blades. Foundries struggled to deliver metals of the right quality. Skilled machinists were scarce. Test cells were few. Every unit that passed inspection felt like a small miracle. The rocket path was no easier. The Shusui was copied from a design that even its originators called treacherous. Its propellants were dangerous. Its flight profile left seconds to aim and fire. One mistake meant a fatal spin or a stall short of the runway. Even when an airframe and an engine came together, another wall rose up. Fuel. The Empire faced a drought. Tankers were sunk. Oil fields were lost. Synthetic substitutes could not fill the tanks. A jet could run, but not often. A rocket could launch, but at the cost of chemicals that workshops hated to store and pilots feared to breathe. Training time shrank. Simulators were rare. Pilots touched new machines only a handful of times before combat. Meanwhile, the United States moved in the opposite direction. Factories operated day and night. Standard parts poured from dozens of states. Engine hours were counted by the thousand. Airfields sprouted radar sets that guided fighters into the path of incoming raids. The contrast was brutal. Bombs fell on engine plants, on airframe lines, on rail hubs. The industrial map turned into islands, each isolated from the others. A jet wing waited for a spar. A fuselage waited for a canopy. A finished engine waited for a truck that would never arrive. The few complete aircraft met the next barrier on the runway itself. There was little reliable high-octane gasoline for tests. There was little clean kerosene for the jets. There were almost no spare turbines. Every aborted takeoff risked losing an irreplaceable core. Every burst of rocket thrust consumed propellants that could not be replaced quickly. The first flight attempts brought hard lessons. One Shusui prototype stalled and crashed on its initial climb. Investigators found control quirks and training gaps that only time and safe testing could fix. Time was gone. Another team coaxed Kika into the air for brief hops, then faced a choice between caution and desperation. The front line begged for miracles. The factories begged for days without air raids. The planners begged for steel and copper. None of those wishes were granted. Even if a squadron of Kika fighters had reached operational status, they would have needed a web that did not exist. They would have needed radar to cue them before the bombers arrived. They would have needed fuel farms guarded by strong escorts. They would have needed spare engines and trained crews to keep readiness above a handful of sorties per week. The same was true for the Schussway. A rocket that could not launch often was a museum piece with live warheads. A jet that could not be maintained was a statue with wings. The dream therefore narrowed. Engineers cut weight. Leaders trimmed requirements. Units improvised field fixes. But a pattern never changed. The United States flooded the theater with aircraft, with tankers, with radar, with trained mechanics, and with standardized parts. Japan fielded prototypes and small batches. The sky does not respect prototypes. The sky rewards mass, fuel, and timing. By the time the orange blossom opened its petals, the season had passed. Here is the twist that keeps viewers watching. The ideas were good. The bravery was real. The prototypes were not the problem. The system was the problem. Without fuel, without metals, without safe test time, without a network that turns a machine into a force, the jet and the rocket were meteors. They flashed. They vanished. The bombers kept coming. The lesson is clear and unsettling. Technology without mass is a promise. Technology with mass is power. In the Pacific, the outcome was decided not by a single breakthrough, but by the industrial method that could turn any breakthrough into thousands of engines, thousands of sorties, and a sky that belonged to the side that could keep flying tomorrow. Imagine a giant submarine surfacing in the dark Pacific night, not to launch torpedoes, but to launch aircraft. That was the audacious promise of the I-400 class. A steel leviathan carrying floatplanes in a sealed hangar, able to strike far beyond the range of surface fleets, and then vanish beneath the waves. It sounds like the twist that could change the war. Yet this weapon arrived as a whisper, not a thunderclap. Only a few boats were completed. Crews trained in haste. The support network they needed did not exist. There were too few spare parts, too few tenders, too few sheltered anchorages, and too few pilots comfortable with night launch and recovery on a heaving ocean. The idea was grand. The system around it was thin. While the submarine aircraft carriers inched toward readiness, a quieter crisis spread across the fleet. Shipboard air defense lagged behind the storm that was coming. Many vessels still relied on light guns whose mounts shook under recoil and whose sights could not track fast-diving attackers. There were no proximity fuses to bloom a wall of timed bursts around incoming planes. There were not enough radar directors to stitch gunnery, range, and bearing into a single deadly loop. On paper batteries looked dense. In practice, coordination was slow, stabilization was poor, and shells often burst behind or below their targets. The result was a sky that looked defended and yet too often let the enemy through. Now place those two threads side by side. On one hand, a spectacular innovation that arrived in handfuls. On the other, the everyday tools of survival at sea failing to keep pace with the threat. American task forces sailed with radar on every escort and practiced voice procedures until the calls sounded like music. Japanese formations sailed with islands of excellence scattered in an ocean of gaps. When raids came at dusk or in the rain, the difference in sensing and directing fire became the difference between a damaged ship limping away and a burning ship rolling over. Here is the hook. Imagine if the I-400 concept had been multiplied by dozens, supplied by forward bases, guided by a net of shore radars, and shielded by modern air defense. Imagine if convoys had enjoyed the same protection. Instead, a different story unfolded, and it was written not by a single wonder weapon, but by the absence of 1,000 ordinary tools working together. Beneath the surface lay the third pillar of this chapter. Anti-submarine warfare. Merchant traffic is the bloodstream of any island empire. It must move fuel, ore, rubber, and grain across long sea lanes. To protect that flow you need sonar sets on escorts, trained operators, reliable depth charges, aircraft with radar to close the night sky, and above all a disciplined convoy system that never relaxes. Japan never produced those elements in the numbers required. Escorts were too few. Many lacked modern sonar and ahead-throwing weapons. Patrol aircraft could not cover the voids. Escort carriers, the small workhorses that knit air cover over convoys in the Atlantic, were rare in the Pacific for Japan. Submarines hunted tankers and/or ships, and each sinking echoed again months later, when a task force stayed in port for lack of fuel. That is why the grand machine struggled. An I-400 cannot sail if the bunker oil is not delivered. A cruiser's guns cannot roar if ammunition ships are lost. Fighters cannot surge to altitude if gasoline is rationed and spare engines are delayed. Logistics is not a backdrop. It is the stage. In this drama, air defense and anti-submarine protection were not glamorous, but they were decisive. Without them, brilliant ideas had no room to breathe. Consider the counterfactual with clear eyes. If radar directors had been standard on destroyers from the early years. If proximity fuses had been mass-produced. If hundreds of sturdy escorts with dependable sonar had grown from the slips. If small carriers had flown patrols over every tanker lane. Losses to bombing would have fallen, losses to submarines would have shrunk, and the submarine aircraft carriers might have had the fuel, the time, and the cover to attempt bold strikes. Even then, the industrial tide pressed hard. The United States trained thousands of technicians, swapped components between ships with ease, and replaced losses faster than opponents could count. But a tighter air defense net and a ruthless anti-submarine doctrine would have lengthened Japan's operational life and raised the cost of every American mile. In the end, this chapter is not a tale of failure of imagination. It is a tale of failure of multiplication. Ideas appeared. Systems did not. Submarine aircraft carriers sailed too late and too few. Air defense guns barked without the modern eyes and fuses they needed. Convoys crossed oceans without enough steel guardians above and below. The result was inevitable. The most daring platforms became museum pieces of what might have been, while the quiet disciplines of detection, coordination, and protection decided the sea war one unglamorous mile at a time. Imagine a tank that cannot reach the battlefield even when the crew is ready and the gun is loaded. Imagine an assault gun with no fuel to move, no trucks to carry shells, and no radios to call for help. That is the hook of this chapter. The story of Japanese armor is not only about thin plates and small guns. It is about iron without arteries. It is about machines cut off from fuel, from spare parts, and from the river of ammunition that turns metal into force. Early victories hid the weakness. Light tanks rolled through Malaya and the Philippines on narrow roads and jungle tracks, facing enemies with fewer anti-tank weapons. Then the war changed. American Marines and soldiers brought heavier guns, better radios, and bulldozers that carved new roads in days. Japanese crews met Shermans that could take hits and still advance. They needed thicker armor, longer barrels, better sights. Engineers drew up new models with stronger engines and higher velocity guns. Workshops produced prototypes and short runs. The paper army looked promising. The real army could not feed it. Steel was short. High-grade alloys were shorter. Optical glass for good sights was precious. Engines competed with ships and aircraft for parts. The Navy took fuel first, the Air Service took what was left, and the Army took the remainder. A tank division is more than tanks. It is rivers of gasoline, motor oil, and water. It is battalions of drivers in thousands of trucks. Japan never had enough trucks. Fuel convoys were sunk. Tires wore out faster than factories could replace them. A tank with no truck behind it is a tank that will soon stop. When road nets broke under bombing and when barges did not arrive, crews siphoned gasoline from wrecks, mixed fuel by hand, and begged for motor oil from civilian depots. Engines coughed. Gearboxes failed. Vehicles turned into pillboxes. Ammunition told the same tale. Anti-armor shells were limited. High-explosive shells for infantry support ran low in every long fight. Rate of fire slowed to a careful drip. Crews chose targets not by priority but by the number of rounds left in the rack. Even the best gun is a promise that must be paid for every minute of battle. Without shell trains, that promise breaks. Artillery units rationed fire to a few salvos at dawn and dusk. Assault guns stayed hidden, saving fuel for short dashes. Infantry waited for barrages that never came. Against American logistics, built on standard parts and endless trucks, this was not a fair match. The enemy replaced barrels in the field. The enemy swapped engines like they were spark plugs. Japanese mechanics made miracles with wire, scrap metal, and hand tools. They could not make gasoline out of courage. Air power multiplied the gap. American fighter bombers hunted roads, bridges, and ferries. A single missed shipment became a missing day of combat. 2 missing days became a lost island. Anti-air guns barked but lacked proximity fuses and radar guidance. They fired bravely and they fired blind. Every convoy that turned back meant fewer shells for the next attack. Every depot that burned meant another tank battalion parked under camouflage nets, waiting for deliveries that never came. Design bureaus proposed heavier vehicles and better guns. Some late-war models could hurt a Sherman from the front at useful ranges. A few reached units and fought well in narrow moments. But new machines need factories, test stands, and training time. They also need gasoline by the river and trucks by the thousand. Bomber raids shattered assembly lines. Power outages halted heat treatment. Skilled workers joined the colors or were moved to emergency tasks. Even when a batch of new tanks rolled out, commanders often dispersed them in ones and twos to plug holes, because no fuel was available to mass them. Detail 8 Strategy 1 Ration can at a time. Look at any map of the Pacific and you see islands. Look again and you will see holes in a pipeline. Every mile of ocean is a link in a chain that must not break. Escorts with modern radar and sonar protect that chain. Japan did not have enough of them. Submarines and aircraft cut the links. Ships with armor plate and gasoline never reached the front. Without those ships, the tanks that were already in theater could not move. Without movement, no assault gun could support an infantry push, no reserve could counterattack, and no breakthrough could be exploited. The result was not a single dramatic collapse. It was a slow dimming of power, day after day. This is the lesson. Hardware wins only when supply makes it breathe. A tank is an organ. Logistics is the blood. In this war the American method flooded the body with fuel, shells, spare parts, and trained crews. The Japanese system bled from 100 cuts. Factories built iron, but convoys could not feed it. Bridges fell, depots burned, and engines starved. In the end, iron without arteries became silence. The decisive weapon was not a single tank or gun. The decisive weapon was the road that stayed open, the ship that arrived on time, and the warehouse that never ran dry. The first missing pillar was raw material. Oil, rubber, high-grade bauxite, alloying metals, and precision bearings were scarce and easily cut off. Tankers were few, convoys were thin, escorts were late, and submarines waited on the sea lanes. Each cancelled voyage echoed on the flight line and at the pier. No fuel meant empty training hours and grounded squadrons. No rubber meant no tires for trucks that should have carried guns and shells. No alloys meant turbine blades cracked, gun barrels wore out, and radios failed under heat and salt. The second pillar was the factory system. Ideas lived on drawing boards, but reliable output demanded dies, gauges, machine tools, and workers trained for repeatable tasks. Rival services fought for budgets and for shop floor priority. Small workshops produced heroic one-offs, while the enemy stamped identical sets by the thousand. Without standardized parts, a single broken pump or a burned vacuum tube could idle an entire squadron. Without interchangeable mounts, a new radar could not move from a test field to every destroyer and every airfield. Without training pipelines, maintenance crews, and spare sets, each installation became a lonely island that failed the first time weather, salt, or battle stress called its bluff. The third pillar was protection. Plants, rail hubs, and shipyards took hits. Evacuation scattered skilled teams. Power flickered. Quality slipped. To keep lines moving, managers cut inspections and accepted wider tolerances. A jet that flies once in a calm test is not a fleet. A rocket interceptor that glides from a tow plane is not an operational defense. To turn a prototype into a weapon, you must defend the people, the tools, and the routes that feed it, day after day, month after month. The fourth pillar was integration. Radar without a reporting chain is a light in the fog. A fast interceptor without ground control is a sprinter in a maze. Submarines carrying aircraft are wonders on the blueprint, but without trained crews, spare engines, and clear doctrine, they become slow, expensive curiosities. Integration means doctrine, drills, and radios that speak the same language across ships, airfields, and headquarters. Integration needs time, fuel, and repetition. There was never enough of any of them. Beneath the surface lay the third pillar of this chapter. Anti-submarine warfare. Merchant traffic is the bloodstream of any island empire. It must move fuel, ore, rubber, and grain across long sea lanes. To protect that flow, you need sonar sets on escorts, trained operators, reliable depth charges, aircraft with radar to close the night sky, and above all a disciplined convoy system that never relaxes. Japan never produced those elements in the numbers required. Escorts were too few. Many lacked modern sonar and ahead-throwing weapons. Patrol aircraft could not cover the voids. Escort carriers, the small workhorses that knit air cover over convoys in the Atlantic, were rare in the Pacific for Japan. Submarines hunted tankers and/or ships, and each sinking echoed again months later, when a task force stayed in port for lack of fuel. That is why the grand machine struggled. An I-400 cannot sail if the bunker oil is not delivered. A cruiser's guns cannot roar if ammunition ships are lost. Fighters cannot surge to altitude if gasoline is rationed and spare engines are delayed. Logistics is not a backdrop. It is the stage. In this drama, air defense and anti-submarine protection were not glamorous, but they were decisive. Without them, brilliant ideas had no room to breathe. Consider the counterfactual with clear eyes. If radar directors had been standard on destroyers from the early years. If proximity fuses had been mass-produced. If hundreds of sturdy escorts with dependable sonar had grown from the slips. If small carriers had flown patrols over every tanker lane. Losses to bombing would have fallen, losses to submarines would have shrunk, and the submarine aircraft carriers might have had the fuel, the time, and the cover to attempt bold strikes. Even then, the industrial tide pressed hard. The United States trained thousands of technicians, swapped components between ships with ease, and replaced losses faster than opponents could count. But a tighter air defense net and a ruthless anti-submarine doctrine would have lengthened Japan's operational life and raised the cost of every American mile. In the end, this chapter is not a tale of failure of imagination. It is a tale of failure of multiplication. Ideas appeared. Systems did not. Submarine aircraft carriers sailed too late and too few. Air defense guns barked without the modern eyes and fuses they needed. Convoys crossed oceans without enough steel guardians above and below. The result was inevitable. The most daring platforms became museum pieces of what might have been, while the quiet disciplines of detection, coordination, and protection decided the sea war one unglamorous mile at a time. Imagine a tank that cannot reach the battlefield even when the crew is ready and the gun is loaded. Imagine an assault gun with no fuel to move, no trucks to carry shells, and no radios to call for help. That is the hook of this chapter. The story of Japanese armor is not only about thin plates and small guns. It is about iron without arteries. It is about machines cut off from fuel, from spare parts, and from the river of ammunition that turns metal into force. Early victories hid the weakness. Light tanks rolled through Malaya and the Philippines on narrow roads and jungle tracks, facing enemies with fewer anti-tank weapons. Then the war changed. American Marines and soldiers brought heavier guns, better radios, and bulldozers that carved new roads in days. Japanese crews met Shermans that could take hits and still advance. They needed thicker armor, longer barrels, better sights. Engineers drew up new models with stronger engines and higher velocity guns. Workshops produced prototypes and short runs. The paper army looked promising. The real army could not feed it. Steel was short. High-grade alloys were shorter. Optical glass for good sights was precious. Engines competed with ships and aircraft for parts. The Navy took fuel first, the Air Service took what was left, and the Army took the remainder. A tank division is more than tanks. It is rivers of gasoline, motor oil, and water. It is battalions of drivers in thousands of trucks. Japan never had enough trucks. Fuel convoys were sunk. Tires wore out faster than factories could replace them. A tank with no truck behind it is a tank that will soon stop. When road nets broke under bombing and when barges did not arrive, crews siphoned gasoline from wrecks, mixed fuel by hand, and begged for motor oil from civilian depots. Engines coughed. Gearboxes failed. Vehicles turned into pillboxes. Ammunition told the same tale. Anti-armor shells were limited. High-explosive shells for infantry support ran low in every long fight. Rate of fire slowed to a careful drip. Crews chose targets not by priority but by the number of rounds left in the rack. Even the best gun is a promise that must be paid for every minute of battle. Without shell trains, that promise breaks. Artillery units rationed fire to a few salvos at dawn and dusk. Assault guns stayed hidden, saving fuel for short dashes. Infantry waited for barrages that never came. Against American logistics, built on standard parts and endless trucks, this was not a fair match. The enemy replaced barrels in the field. The enemy swapped engines like they were spark plugs. Japanese mechanics made miracles with wire, scrap metal, and hand tools. They could not make gasoline out of courage. Air power multiplied the gap. American fighter bombers hunted roads, bridges, and ferries. A single missed shipment became a missing day of combat. 2 missing days became a lost island. Anti-air guns barked but lacked proximity fuses and radar guidance. They fired bravely and they fired blind. Every convoy that turned back meant fewer shells for the next attack. Every depot that burned meant another tank battalion parked under camouflage nets, waiting for deliveries that never came. Design bureaus proposed heavier vehicles and better guns. Some late-war models could hurt a Sherman from the front at useful ranges. A few reached units and fought well in narrow moments. But new machines need factories, test stands, and training time. They also need gasoline by the river and trucks by the thousand. Bomber raids shattered assembly lines. Power outages halted heat treatment. Skilled workers joined the colors or were moved to emergency tasks. Even when a batch of new tanks rolled out, commanders often dispersed them in ones and twos to plug holes, because no fuel was available to mass them. Detail 8 Strategy 1 Ration can at a time. Look at any map of the Pacific and you see islands. Look again and you will see holes in a pipeline. Every mile of ocean is a link in a chain that must not break. Escorts with modern radar and sonar protect that chain. Japan did not have enough of them. Submarines and aircraft cut the links. Ships with armor plate and gasoline never reached the front. Without those ships, the tanks that were already in theater could not move. Without movement, no assault gun could support an infantry push, no reserve could counterattack, and no breakthrough could be exploited. The result was not a single dramatic collapse. It was a slow dimming of power, day after day. This is the lesson. Hardware wins only when supply makes it breathe. A tank is an organ. Logistics is the blood. In this war, the American method flooded the body with fuel, shells, spare parts, and trained crews. The Japanese system bled from 100 cuts. Factories built iron, but convoys could not feed it. Bridges fell, depots burned, and engines starved. In the end, iron without arteries became silence. The decisive weapon was not a single tank or gun. The decisive weapon was the road that stayed open, the ship that arrived on time, and the warehouse that never ran dry. The first missing pillar was raw material. Oil, rubber, high-grade bauxite, alloying metals, and precision bearings were scarce and easily cut off. Tankers were few, convoys were thin, escorts were late, and submarines waited on the sea lanes. Each cancelled voyage echoed on the flight line and at the pier. No fuel meant empty training hours and grounded squadrons. No rubber meant no tires for trucks that should have carried guns and shells. No alloys meant turbine blades cracked, gun barrels wore out, and radios failed under heat and salt. The second pillar was the factory system. Ideas lived on drawing boards, but reliable output demanded dies, gauges, machine tools, and workers trained for repeatable tasks. Rival services fought for budgets and for shop floor priority. Small workshops produced heroic one-offs, while the enemy stamped identical sets by the thousand. Without standardized parts, a single broken pump or a burned vacuum tube could idle an entire squadron. Without interchangeable mounts, a new radar could not move from a test field to every destroyer and every airfield. Without training pipelines, maintenance crews, and spare sets, each installation became a lonely island that failed the first time weather, salt, or battle stress called its bluff. The third pillar was protection. Plants, rail hubs, and shipyards took hits. Evacuation scattered skilled teams. Power flickered. Quality slipped. To keep lines moving, managers cut inspections and accepted wider tolerances. A jet that flies once in a calm test is not a fleet. A rocket interceptor that glides from a tow plane is not an operational defense. To turn a prototype into a weapon, you must defend the people, the tools, and the routes that feed it, day after day, month after month. The fourth pillar was integration. Radar without a reporting chain is a light in the fog. A fast interceptor without ground control is a sprinter in a maze. Submarines carrying aircraft are wonders on the blueprint, but without trained crews, spare engines, and clear doctrine, they become slow, expensive curiosities. Integration means doctrine, drills, and radios that speak the same language across ships, airfields, and headquarters. Integration needs time, fuel, and repetition. There was never enough of any of them. Now see how these pillars shaped the result. Every deficiency multiplied the next. Fuel shortages cut training hours, which drove accident rates up, which consumed more parts, which the factories could not replace, which grounded more aircraft, which left convoys with weaker cover, which lost more tankers, which deepened the fuel shortage. The system did not bend. The system cracked. Across the ocean, the opponent did the opposite. Ideas were standardized into families of parts. Suppliers were networked across states. Crews were trained in large schools with simulators and spare airframes. Radar sets moved from trial to destroyer class to escort carrier class to airfields in months, not years. The same bolts and the same tubes fit everywhere. When one plant took a hit, two others raised output. Every installation had a manual, a toolbox, and a replacement schedule. Quantity bred quality because repetition teaches the worker, the inspector, and the pilot at the same time. Consider the jet dream. A prototype can fly a brave sortie. A fleet must launch every dawn and every dusk. That demands heat-resistant alloys, precision bearings, high-octane fuel or reliable substitutes, depots full of spare engines, and ground crews who have changed those engines a dozen times before the first mission. Without that chain, each takeoff risks becoming the last. Consider air defense. Radar detection must cue a filter room, which must cue fighter control, which must talk to pilots on the correct frequency, which must lead them to altitude at the correct time, which must be followed by rearming, refueling, and maintenance. If any link fails, the bomber stream passes. If the whole chain repeats each night, the bomber stream pays. The winner was the side that made the chain simple, replaceable, and tireless. In the end, the decisive weapon was not a single machine. The decisive weapon was the method. The method was standardize, train, protect, and repeat until the extraordinary becomes ordinary. A radar on one ship is a headline. A radar on every ship is sea control. A jet in a test hangar is a promise. A squadron on alert is air defense. A submarine that carries one aircraft is a marvel. A convoy that always arrives is victory. That is why brilliant projects did not take off. Not because the ideas were weak, but because ideas alone do not fly. They need fuel in the tank, parts on the shelf, crews on the roster, escorts on the horizon, and a doctrine that ties it all together. When those pieces are missing, the first shock of battle strips the paint off the promise. When those pieces are present, ordinary machines do extraordinary things. That is how the outcome was decided. Summer 1943. Camp Crossville, Tennessee. A German soldier watches a brown fizzy liquid swirl in a glass bottle. He has never seen such a drink. After 2 years in North Africa living on hard biscuits and ersatz coffee, he tastes Coca-Cola for the first time. It costs 5 cents at the camp canteen. Guards explain that American children buy the same bottle with their allowance. The price and the flavor feel like something unreal made ordinary. Across American prison camps in that summer, 371,683 German PS meet a reality that cancels the lessons of Nazi propaganda about American weakness. They walk into a country where ice cream is an expected dessert, where soft drinks are daily habits, and where candy bars are so common that guards hand them out. These simple foods act like patient teachers. Sugar and bubbles and chocolate and cold cream expose an industrial capacity that turns German shortage from noble sacrifice into needless pain. What begins as surprise at American treats quickly grows into a deep change in thinking. The Desert War ends. The Afrika Korps surrenders in Tunisia in May 1943, and nearly 250,000 German and Italian soldiers enter Allied hands. These veterans who had pushed the British back to Egypt under RML expect harsh captivity. Propaganda has told them to fear American brutality and plan starvation. Instead, hours after surrender, they meet American creations. United States soldiers complain about them all the time, yet the boxes hold wonders for the prisoners. There are crackers, processed cheese, candy, fruit bars, instant coffee, sugar tablets, and cigarettes. Men who have lived on thin rations for months open these emergency meals like festival platters. Records show that at processing camps in North Africa, the United States Army serves pancakes with syrup, fresh eggs, and milk. Those foods had disappeared from German issue long before. The systematic feeding of enemies with better food begins at once. Its effect on the mind will be measured only later. A German officer later tells the International Red Cross that they had expected to be starved as prisoners and that the Americans fed them better than their own army. He says that confusion about American resources started their education. The lesson continues on the ocean. Liberty ships carry PS across the Atlantic during the summer of 1943, and the voyage becomes a classroom in abundance. These cargo vessels are built at a pace that defies belief. At peak output, one hull is completed every 42 hours. They move as many as 30,000 prisoners to the United States each month. The men see the scale of the docks, the stacks of supplies, and the routine speed of loading and sailing. They watch how the kitchen runs and how the crew eats and works without shortage. The ship itself is proof that the American way of war rests on a river of goods. By the time the prisoners reach camps in the interior, they have felt the pattern. Food arrives when the schedule says it will arrive. Canteens carry soda, candy, and cigarettes at the same price every day. Ice is not a miracle but an item. The guards are ordinary young men who expect dessert and a weekend and who explain prices without anger. The map of the wider war becomes clearer. The prisoners begin to understand that armies follow factories and that morale follows rations. They think about their own families and about the long lines for coal and butter at home. Some write that the taste of a sugar cube or a cold drink does more to undo old slogans than any speech. Camp Crossville becomes a place of small but steady shocks. A nickel buys the same bottle for a child and for a captured soldier. A box marked Creations holds more variety than a frontline kitchen. Pancakes with syrup and a mug of milk appear at a table and no one calls it a miracle. The lesson is simple and merciless. Abundance is policy. Scarcity is a choice forced by failure. The Liberty ships turning out every 42 hours make the point again. Each hull is another mile of supply line and another argument that the outcome will be decided by production and transport more than by speeches and flags. What began with a bottle of Coca-Cola becomes a quiet revolution of the mind. The prisoners still wear the same uniforms and salute the same names, but their private measure of strength has changed. Ice cream is a routine dessert. Soft drinks are daily. Candy is common. The arithmetic of this country is written in full plates and full shelves. It is written in the steady roll of Liberty ships and in the regular clink of a 5-cent coin on a canteen counter. Naval records state that prisoner rations on these ships matched or exceeded standard crew provisions. The daily intake reached about 3,500 calories. The food included fresh bread, meat and vegetables and coffee with sugar and milk. American vessels carried refrigeration as standard equipment. Cold stores kept produce fresh across the ocean passage. Multiple accounts confirm that ice cream appeared more than once during Atlantic crossings. The log of the USS General M.B. Stewart in July 1943 notes ice cream served to prisoners on July 4. The entry mentions a shipboard ice cream maker that produced 10 gallons per batch. For men who had not tasted ice cream since before the war, that cold dessert in the middle of the ocean felt impossible. When ships tied up at Norfolk and Newport News, the German POWs stepped into an America that Nazi propaganda had said could not exist. The Norfolk naval base covered 4,300 acres with long waterfront piers and cranes. It handled more cargo in a single day than major German harbors moved in a week. At the port exchanges which served dock workers, the prisoners saw shelves lined with candy bars from Hershey, Mars and Nestle. Military procurement papers from 1943 show dozens of varieties on order. Most bars sold for 5 cents, which was the same price posted nationwide. The trip inland by train added another lesson. Instead of cattle cars, the German POWs rode in passenger coaches. Dining cars served full meals without ceremony. Preserved menus from July 1943 list fried chicken, vegetables, pie and coffee. The guards explained that this was not a favor. It was normal American rail service. Across the United States, the prison camp network met and often exceeded the Geneva Convention rules. Camp Crossville in Tennessee offers a typical example among larger posts. The barracks had electric light hot water flush toilets and heating for winter nights. The post exchange left the strongest mark. Army quartermaster records show shelves with many soft drink brands including Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper and RC Cola. The stores also carried assorted candy bars and other confections. Where refrigerators were installed, they sold ice cream as well. Cigarettes, tobacco, fresh fruit and simple snacks were present. Beer with 3.2% alcohol content appeared at some locations. Prisoners earned pay for labor. The daily amount began at 80 cents and later rose to $1. A candy bar cost 5 cents and a bottle of Coca-Cola cost the same. A single day of work could buy 16 small items. Such everyday abundance exceeded German experience, where these goods, if found at all, required rare favors. Coca-Cola became a clear symbol of American industrial democracy. Company figures record 5 billion bottles produced in 1943 alone. The military agreement promised a 5-cent Coca-Cola for every American serviceman anywhere in the world. Fulfilling that promise demanded a supply system on a scale the army had never attempted. German prisoners who had never tasted the drink before capture discovered that in the United States it was everywhere. Every camp saw regular deliveries. Work details noticed vending machines and ice chests at gas stations, at factories and at schools. People of every age and income drank it without ceremony and often tossed away bottles that were still partly full. Technically minded prisoners were stunned by the sameness. Coca-Cola tasted identical in Maine and in Texas. That level of quality control surpassed anything they knew from German industry. The syrup was produced in Atlanta and sent to a web of bottlers across the nation, and the clockwork coordination of that network contradicted Nazi claims that American society was chaotic. Company archives describe many camps receiving 200 to 300 cases each week, with 24 bottles in a case. Camp Hearn, Texas alone went through about 7,000 bottles per week in the summer of 1943. Ice cream in American prison camps seemed like fantasy to men who had not seen it since before the war. Army records show that when refrigeration was available, camps served it in the hot months. The Army treated ice cream as a tool for morale, and the Navy went so far as to commission ships whose purpose was to make and carry ice cream for the Pacific Fleet. At Camp Shelby, Mississippi, the Independence Day celebration on July 4, 1943 featured ice cream made on site. Prisoners watched while hand-cranked freezers turned ice, salt, cream, sugar and flavorings into gallons of dessert. The easy use of rare goods in wartime, ice in July and dairy and sugar for a pleasure food, revealed a set of priorities that Germans could not understand. By 1944 many camps owned electric machines that replaced the hand cranks. Choices multiplied. Chocolate, vanilla, strawberry and butter pecan were common and in greater variety than pre-war German parlors had offered. A bar cost 10 cents. A sandwich cost 10 cents. Cups came in several flavors for the same price. Procurement files show that large camps ordered 50 to 100 gallons of ice cream every summer week. Quantities rose and fell with weather and location, but the prisoners grew used to a frozen luxury that had disappeared from daily life in Germany. Sugar left the strongest impression of all. In Germany, sugar was tightly rationed. Civilians, when supplies existed, received 280 grams per month. In American camps, bowls of loose sugar sat on mess hall tables for anyone to use. Quartermaster reports from 1943 through 1945 list weekly shipments of 100-pound sacks of refined sugar to many installations. Camp bakeries drew from those sacks without restraint. Cakes, cookies and pies showed up on mess hall menus day after day. Cooks added sugar to coffee and tea and cereals and every kind of dessert without limits. A case from Camp Aliceville, Alabama makes the contrast clear. In August 1943 the humid air turned several hundred pounds of sugar into a hard block that was difficult to use. Instead of steaming it loose as Germans would have done, the kitchen threw it out and requested new supplies. German prisoners assigned to the kitchen were visibly upset by this waste. Chocolate habits revealed the scale of American abundance. Major firms Hershey, Mars and Nestle turned out millions of bars each month, even under wartime rules. The military alone bought 380 million pounds of chocolate products during the war years. Prison camp exchanges kept several kinds of chocolate on the shelves. The standard Hershey bar and emergency chocolate bars and other candy bars that included chocolate sold for 5 to 10 cents. Prisoners learned that Americans had favorite brands and chose among them without concern. Red Cross parcels handed out each month added more proof. The American Red Cross records show that a standard package usually included chocolate or candy bars and 2 packets of instant coffee and processed cheese and crackers and canned meat and cigarettes and soap. These items sat on top of regular camp rations and created a level of comfort that went beyond what many German civilians received as basic food. Thanksgiving 1943 introduced German prisoners to a distinct American ritual of plenty. The holiday displayed a national system of supply and planning that Germany could not match. Army records state that all prison camps served a traditional Thanksgiving dinner. Roast turkey with stuffing and mashed potatoes with gravy and sweet potatoes and cranberry sauce and vegetables and pumpkin pie and coffee and milk. The logistics behind serving turkey to 425,000 prisoners and to millions of American servicemen around the world demonstrated organizational power. The fact that German prisoners ate the same meal as American soldiers underscored an equal treatment principle that clashed with Nazi racial hierarchy. Christmas 1943 brought another surprise in the form of civilian generosity. Church groups, civic clubs and private citizens mailed gifts to German prisoners of war. The American Friends Service Committee alone delivered 50,000 Christmas packages to enemy prisoners. These parcels often contained homemade cookies and candy and toiletries and small games and books and cigarettes and writing supplies. Towns near the camps added local kindness. In Tonkawa, Oklahoma, residents carried homemade treats into Camp Tonkawa. In Hearne, Texas, church groups brought Christmas cookies and candy to Camp Hearne. Civilian kindness shown to enemies cut against the core of Nazi ideology. Americans who had sons and brothers in combat against Germany still chose mercy toward German prisoners. They showed strength through restraint and help rather than revenge. As the labor shortage grew sharper, German POWs were sent beyond the fences more often. They worked in fields, canneries, dairies and warehouses and saw with their own eyes how American food systems truly worked. By 1944, roughly 100,000 prisoners labored in agriculture and food processing. They learned the scale of American abundance not from leaflets but from the weight of crates and the length of loading docks. In Michigan orchards, the prisoners climbed ladders and picked cherries headed for maraschino production. They watched tons of fruit move toward a garnish that would ride on top of ice cream sundaes. The sheer volume stunned them. One farm could fill railcars with fruit meant only to decorate desserts. At canneries, they watched quality control staff reject food that would have been treasured in Germany. Del Monte records from 1944 noted that close to 15% of fruit was rejected for canning because of size irregularities or small blemishes. That fruit often went into animal feed. The lesson was as simple as it was brutal. America could afford to say no to food that others would fight to obtain. Sugar beet processing in Colorado and Nebraska gave another shock. The prisoners saw harvesters and conveyors and boilers move in smooth rhythm. A single farm produced more sugar beetheads than entire German regions. Supervisors explained numbers that seemed unreal. Annual American sugar production from cane and beets reached about 7 million tons. The prisoners finally understood why cookies filled diner cases and why candy bowls sat by cash registers. What looked like waste to them was only the surface of a deep supply. German prisoners who worked near schools saw early forms of organized school lunch programs. Children lined up with trays and received hot lunches that included milk, protein and vegetables. The National School Lunch Act would fix this system in law in 1946, yet wartime pilot programs already ran on a large scale. The milk program impressed the prisoners most. Many schools served fresh milk every day. Trucks delivered to thousands of buildings on time through winter and mud. The same country that kept milk cold for classrooms also kept fuel moving to divisions at the front. Some cafeterias sold ice cream to children as an extra. The sight felt unreal to men who knew that German children often stood in cold lines for bread. Minimum security prisoners sometimes ate at American diners while under guard. There they met a different kind of power. A menu that would match an elite German hotel lay open to any customer with modest money. Documents from 1944 list prices that read like a small miracle. Hamburger 25 cents. Coca-Cola 5 cents. A slice of pie 15 cents. An ice cream sundae 25 cents. A full dinner special 65 to 75 cents. All of it served without rank or privilege. A factory worker and a bank president sat on adjacent stools at the same counter and ordered the same plate from the same waitress for the same price. For prisoners raised in a world of rigid social ladders, that equality was as shocking as the food itself. As access to American newspapers and pamphlets widened, the prisoners began to read production tables that dwarfed anything they knew from home. The numbers matched the evidence of their days. Trucks that always arrived. Pipes that never went dry. Warehouses that filled faster than they emptied. Civilian kindness toward enemies did not signal weakness. It revealed a society confident in its strength. The prisoners saw that confidence in orchards that wasted nothing important and in schoolrooms where milk arrived warm in clean bottles. They carried those images back to camp each night along with the memory of prices on a chalkboard and the steady clink of plates on a diner rail. American production in 1944 told its own story. Sugar reached about 7 million tons. Chocolate and cocoa for the military alone totaled 380 million pounds. Coca-Cola bottled 5 billion units in 1943. Ice cream passed 500 million gallons. Milk output reached 119 billion by official count. German output in the same period showed a very different picture. Sugar was tightly rationed and came mostly from beets. Chocolate went to the military first and almost only. Soft drinks saw minimal production. Ice cream was almost absent. Milk was severely rationed. These public numbers in American newspapers showed that United States wartime output exceeded German peacetime peaks. By late 1944, German prisoners of war in America sent food home instead of receiving it. Using camp wages, they bought American goods to mail to their families. Chocolate bars, instant coffee, canned food. International Red Cross records confirmed the reversal. German prisoners in the United States sent about 11 million parcels during captivity. Most packages held food. Families inside Germany opened boxes of American abundance while facing hunger at home. This reality cut through Nazi ideology and left it exposed. American rationing also revealed the gulf between the two societies. Citizens complained about a sugar ration of 2 pounds per person per month. That was more than triple the German allowance when it existed at all. American meat rationing at 28 ounces per person each week was more than many Germans saw in a month. Even under controls, Americans kept consumption levels that German civilians would have called luxury. The Office of Price Administration reported that Americans still purchased about 74 pounds of sugar per person in 1944. That was 10 times the German rate. Beyond Coca-Cola, the prisoners discovered a full soft drink industry. Pepsi-Cola, Dr. Pepper, RC Cola, Orange Crush. Many regional brands. Multiple companies made similar products and competed nationwide. The variety itself signaled a market depth that a command economy could not copy. Bottling plants worked in every large city. Carbonation, bottling, capping and labeling followed a standard method. A single plant produced millions of bottles each year. Distribution reached small towns, gas stations and grocery stores. By the end of the war, American soft drink output counted in the billions of bottles yearly. That meant dozens of bottles for each citizen. One single consumer industry surpassed entire German civilian sectors. Spring 1945 delivered the last blow to the old belief. As American forces moved through Germany, the prisoners in American camps watched newsreels of soldiers handing chocolate and gum to German children. The joy on the faces of those children holding American candy that their own state could not provide finished the demolition of the myth. The difference was impossible to miss. American soldiers moved forward through enemy ground with pockets full of candy to hand out. The German state that had promised triumph delivered hunger instead. Newsreel crews filmed the liberation of concentration camps. American troops shared rations with skeletal survivors and showed basic humanity to victims of the regime that German soldiers had served. From 1945 to 1946, German POWs came home to a country in ruins. Many prisoners had gained weight while held by Americans. Their families at home had lost weight to famine and cold. They carried stories of abundance back into a land of scarcity. Medical checks recorded that German prisoners often returned in better health than on the day they were captured. They reunited with households weakened by deprivation. The physical proof of American plenty and German want stood in front of everyone. Many men arrived with final Red Cross parcels. Chocolate, coffee and canned meat became small family treasures. Children who no longer remembered the taste of chocolate unwrapped Hershey bars brought by fathers who had eaten ice cream in prison camps. Former POWs began to support the Marshall Plan. They had seen prosperity that did not depend on plunder. They had witnessed production at a scale that created more for everyone rather than taking from others. Their testimony that Americans could afford to rebuild enemies helped Germans accept American aid. These men understood that American strength came from productive capacity, not extraction. They had watched a society rich enough to waste food while fighting a global war. That idea of creation instead of conquest began to shape choices in the West German economy. The economic miracle of the 1950s drew in part on knowledge absorbed in American prison camps. Former POWs who had seen American factory methods, distribution systems, and consumer shelves full of goods tried those lessons at home. They learned that mass production could turn luxuries into daily items. They learned that standardization raised quality and cut cost. They learned that consumer abundance supported political calm. They saw that an industrial democracy could outproduce authoritarian rule. These lessons carried in memories of Coca-Cola and ice cream influenced a generation of German business leaders and public officials. The change in outlook among German prisoners through exposure to American food abundance is recorded across many sources. Military quartermaster records list ration scales. International Red Cross reports describe parcel flows. Corporate production files including Coca-Cola archives show volumes and routes. PW correspondence which censors read and kept adds personal detail. Post-war interviews and memoirs confirm the theme. Academic studies, especially the work of Arnold Kramer, assemble the evidence. Arnold Kramer, the leading historian of German POWs in America, concluded that food abundance sat at the center of this ideological shift. His research showed that casual American plenty achieved what formal re-education could not. It broke the myth of German superiority and replaced it with a working respect for production efficiency, civilian comfort, and democratic scale. The statistical record is plain to read. The figures make the case without debate. In the United States from 1943 to 1946, the average prisoner received between 3,300 and 3,600 calories each day. Sugar was issued monthly in generous amounts. Meat averaged 32 ounces each week. Milk was available by the quart each day. In summer, ice cream was a normal treat. Soft drinks cost 5 cents and seemed without limit. In the same years, German civilians lived on far less. Daily intake often slipped between 1,200 and 1,500 calories. Sugar might total 280 grams for a month if supplies existed. Meat could be 10.5 ounces for a week and was often missing. Milk was hard to find and tightly controlled. Ice cream did not exist. Soft drinks were not available at all. These gaps were not a poster line. They were documented practice. Enemy prisoners in American hands ate more reliably than many families in Germany. Abundance extended even to men who had fought against the United States. The prisoner experience with American food culture changed post-war Germany in lasting ways. Coca-Cola reappeared in West Germany in 1949 and became a clear sign of the new alliance. Ice cream parlors built on the model of American soda fountains opened in city streets. Candy bars and chewing gum turned into small flags of recovery and hope. Many former prisoners of war later worked as importers of American food. Their own experience told them that the taste mattered, but the meaning mattered more. These products stood for abundance, for democracy, and for modern life. In the 1950s, the first German supermarkets arrived with strong support from men who had seen American grocery stores. They understood that a democratic plenty needed new ways to distribute goods, not only more goods to distribute. Interviews and memoirs repeat the same theme across decades. Former German prisoners consistently called food abundance transformative. A former Africa Corps officer said in a 1975 interview that they had expected a weak and divided America, and instead found a nation that could offer ice cream to its enemies. He concluded that they had lost more than a war. They had lost a worldview. Another veteran in a 1985 documentary recalled his first Coca-Cola as a drink of the future. Sweet and fizzing and unnecessary and open to anyone for a nickel. He said the taste held everything Nazi Germany was not. It held abundance and democracy and joy. Historians now describe the German prisoner experience in America as a re-education by abundance rather than by speeches. It worked because it asked men to watch rather than to obey. They saw a society at full productivity that still treated prisoners with dignity. Food made the lesson clear because hunger and satisfaction need no translation. The proof was visible. Weight returned. Health improved. 3 regular meals each day, plus whatever the canteen could provide. German prisoners of war learned deprivation from the inside. Each meal in an American camp became a lesson in productive power. A bottle of Coca-Cola showed what standardization and distribution could do. An ice cream sundae proved that abundance could be shared by everyone. The idea that plenty might be democratic began with taste and smell and not with speeches. The children of these prisoners grew up on stories about American food and limitless choice. At first those memories sounded exaggerated. As West Germany recovered and American goods appeared on shelves, the stories were confirmed. The mythology of American plenty born behind barbed wire began to shape how Germans understood the United States. Many sons and daughters of prisoners later studied in America or took jobs there. Drawn by their fathers' accounts of impossible variety, they discovered that reality matched the tales. Supermarkets offered long aisles of brands. Soda fountains served sundaes without ceremony. Candy counters displayed dozens of options within easy reach. Business culture in West Germany absorbed these lessons as well. Managers looked past mere output to the goal of reliable quality and steady supply. Companies learned to serve ordinary citizens with the same care once reserved for elites. The economic miracle became not only a story of factories but a story of everyday abundance. The change is visible in daily life. McDonald's operates more than 1,400 restaurants in Germany. Coca-Cola is everywhere. Ice cream is an ordinary treat and not a festival gift. What began in the discipline of prison camps ended as a social norm. Scarcity gave way to plenty and the circle closed. A powerful lesson remains. Ideology can be weakened by generosity rather than by cruelty. Minds can shift through demonstration rather than through propaganda. German prisoners who doubted that ice cream or Coca-Cola could exist in a camp witnessed the strongest tool of a democracy. It was the ability to create such excess that even enemies could share it without ceremony. The story of German prisoners and American food is a quiet victory. A war won through kindness. An ideology challenged by a sundae and a soda served for 5 cents. A worldview shattered by a full plate in a clean canteen. These men changed because they encountered more than slogans. They encountered surplus. They arrived believing in German strength and American softness. They left understanding that American power flowed from a productive base so vast that waste did not matter. A society that could hand Coca-Cola to prisoners for 5 cents possessed a kind of force that exceeded tanks and guns. The price tag said more than any speech. The ice cream sundae became a clear metaphor for American abundance. Ice cream alone exceeded wartime dreams. Syrup was one layer of extra. Whipped cream was another. Nuts and a cherry made luxury into routine. Enemies could ask for a second serving while German children at home knew hunger. The meaning was unavoidable. Former prisoners often recalled one sharp instant of recognition. The first hiss and sparkle of Coca-Cola against the lip. The first cold spoonful of ice cream melting on the tongue. The first square of a Hershey bar breaking between the teeth. Those moments carried more force than an argument. They had tasted democracy and it was sweet. The change in outlook was final and lasting. Men who had once marched under the banner of the Third Reich returned to their homeland as unexpected messengers of a new truth. They spoke of a revelation learned not on the battlefield but behind the fences of captivity, a lesson that strength was born from liberty, not domination. These soldiers discovered that the real power of America did not come from its weapons or its armies, but from its astonishing capacity to share comfort and kindness even with those who had fought against it. Inside the American prison camps they tasted what seemed impossible. Bottles of Coca-Cola passed from hand to hand. Bowls of cold ice cream were served without anger or revenge. In those simple moments, an empire of violence met a world built on generosity. The transformation began quietly, with disbelief, with the question of how a nation so rich could choose mercy over cruelty. The captured soldiers who once believed only in conquest became witnesses to a different kind of victory. When they finally returned home, they carried more than memories of war. They brought the proof that democracy could be tasted in chocolate and freedom could sparkle in a glass of soda. Their stories spread across ruined towns and broken families, a message that abundance could heal what destruction had shattered. In the end, it was not tanks or guns that conquered their hearts, but the simple gift of sweetness on a hot summer day. The men who had lived as enemies became unexpected voices of peace, forever changed by the quiet miracle of Coca-Cola and ice cream in the hands of those who had every reason to hate them, yet chose to give instead. December 16, 1944. Early morning in Mona, Germany. The earth was frozen and the air cut like glass. Another wave of American artillery rushed overhead and the sound rolled across the forest like a storm. Something felt different in a way that frightened even veterans. The shells were not tearing into the soil or shattering tree trunks. They were bursting in the air at a measured height above the advancing German lines, and a hard rain of steel fell straight down. No slit trench gave safety. No foxhole or log roof could stop shards that fell from the sky. Men who had survived years on the Eastern Front stared up and realized that the familiar patterns of fire no longer applied. The old rules had been broken and the safe places had vanished. Among the 326th Volk Grenadier Division that pressed the 38th Cavalry Squadron, the shock spread from one file to the next. They expected a rhythm of impacts and lulls. They found no rhythm. They expected to hug the ground and wait it out. They found that the danger came from above. It felt like a new kind of mathematics. It felt like death measured and timed with instruments rather than guesswork. Snow dust rose from the blast waves and drifted over helmets and coats. Splinters hissed through fir branches. The men moved because to stay still felt like asking to be cut down. The line wavered and slowed. At that same hour, Colonel Oscar Alfred Axelson of the 406th Artillery Group stood over a map table and made a choice that would shape the day. Orders told him to hold back a secret device. He chose to use it. He told his batteries to load shells fitted with proximity fuses. Each fuse held a small radar set able to sense distance to a target and to detonate at the height that produced the most fragments. He did this without permission from his superiors. He knew the risk to his career and perhaps to his freedom. He also knew that ordinary fire would not stop the assault battering the 38th Cavalry Squadron at Monshaw. He chose to accept blame later and to save the line now. The gunners obeyed and the pattern of bursts shifted at once. The effect arrived like a door opening. Shells that would have buried themselves and wasted power in the ground now exploded where the air met the tree line. Cone after cone of steel swept the open spaces and the edges of the woods. Men who had counted on cover felt the new reach of the blasts. Platoons in motion halted. Runners hugged ditches and crawled. Commands were shouted and lost in the noise. The advance lost speed then lost shape. The change felt like a lever moved by an unseen hand. It felt like arithmetic written in shockwaves. Colonel Oscar Alfred Axelson saw the forward observers report a sudden drop in pressure. He knew the decision had worked. Operation Watch on the Rhine had begun under a cover of fog and deception. The Wehrmacht had massed 200,000 men and 1,000 tanks and nearly 2,000 artillery pieces behind the Ardennes in secrecy. The Führer had promised that this stroke would split the Allied front and carry the spearheads to Antwerp. He told his generals that surprise would clear the way and that resolve would finish the task. At 0530 hours on December 16, German guns had achieved perfect surprise along an 85-mile front and fired at a rate of 1,600 rounds per minute. Many American units were composed of replacements still learning the ground. Other units were tired veterans placed in this quiet sector for rest. The first hours went to the attacker. Yet at Monshaw the weight of numbers met the air burst of the new fuse and momentum faltered. Colonel Oscar Alfred Axelson understood the cost of acting without orders. He also understood that delay meant collapse. He accepted that a court-martial might follow. He accepted that history would judge a breach and not the consequence of obedience. He ordered the proximity fused shells into steady use. The shells climbed and sensed and detonated. The fragments traced invisible nets across the approaches. The 38th Cavalry Squadron used the precious minutes to realign its defense and to pull back outposts that were about to be swallowed. The men grabbed ammunition. Medics dragged the wounded over ice. Radio traffic grew calm and purposeful. The line held 1 hour longer. Then another. Word moved through the German ranks that this fire was not normal. Men spoke of invisible wires in the air. Men spoke of magic in the fuse noses. What they did not know was the truth of it. Each device carried a tiny transmitter that measured the path to the ground and chose the moment of maximum harm. What had been a single blow against soil became a wide scatter over men and gear. Fragment density spiked. Casualties spiked. Leaders saw squads shrink and companies lose shape. The ambition of the morning now met the cost of science. The storm that had promised to roll westward slowed in the timber and the hollows. The promise of Operation Watch on the Rhine had been built on secrecy and speed. The proximity fuse cut into both. The fog still lay in the valleys. The snow still squeaked under boots and tracks. Yet above the treetops a different kind of fog formed. It was the gray cloud of mid-air bursts that marked the new zone of danger. The 406th Artillery Group kept the tempo. Forward observers adjusted heights by 10 meters at a time and learned the angles of each draw and ridge. The 326th Volk Grenadier Division pressed and then hesitated. The 38th Cavalry Squadron bent and refused to break. The morning that began with confidence for the Wehrmacht ended with a new understanding. The old calculations of cover and distance and courage had changed. Proximity fuses had multiplied the reach of American guns by a number that men could feel in their bones. Colonel Oscar Alfred Axelson looked across the frozen timber and knew that he had changed more than a skirmish. He had shown that a decision at a map table could redraw the very idea of safety in war. The effect did not only stop an attack. It announced a transformation. The mathematics of death had been rewritten in the winter air over Mona, Germany and the frozen Ardennes. German soldiers who advanced in traditional assault formations were suddenly struck by a kind of artillery fire they had never met before. Shells began to burst in the air 30 to 50 feet above the ground instead of tearing into the soil. Each detonation threw a wide cone of steel fragments that swept over a much larger area than a normal ground burst. Veterans who knew how to survive ordinary barrages were cut down in foxholes and behind tree trunks and in roadside ditches. Every place that had once felt safe became a killing ground. What the men felt as a secret science of death was in truth the meeting of American invention and American industry at their highest pitch. The proximity fuse turned that meeting into power on the battlefield. A standard shell needed a direct hit or a timer that often went wrong and burst too high or too low. The new fuse carried its own small radar and chose the height for itself. The complete device was no larger than a coffee can, yet it held a complete radio set that woke in flight and watched the Earth and the target below. American engineers packed about 130 electronic parts into each fuse and they gave it 4 or 5 miniature vacuum tubes depending on the model. Those tiny tubes had to live through a shock of 20,000 times the force of gravity when the gun fired and then had to keep working while the shell spun and crossed cold air and wet air and storm air. At the instant the shell leaped from the barrel a glass ampoule broke and mixed an electrolyte. That sudden mix created a fresh battery that powered the radar for the rest of the flight. It was hard physics turned into a simple result that any gun crew could use. Dr. Merle Tuve at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory drove the effort with the intensity of the Manhattan Project. The laboratory worked behind a harmless front that looked like an abandoned used car lot in Silver Spring, Maryland. At the peak of the program, the place employed about 3% of all American physicists. Security stood at the level of the atomic program. Workers were not allowed to tell families what they did. Each proximity fuse carried a unique serial number so that any failure could be traced and corrected. Nothing about the job was easy. A vacuum tube built for a living room radio would die at the first shot. Engineers had to reinvent the tube so that it would survive a cannon blast and still pick up the faint signal that marked the ground or a target. The device could not burst too early and it could not sleep through the pass and burst too late. It had to work in snow and in rain and in salt air over the sea. Every demand pushed the technology of the day to its edge. The breakthrough came when the team learned how to miniaturize with methods that would later drive the whole electronics age forward. Dr. James Van Allen and his colleagues produced vacuum tubes no larger than pencil erasers that still held the elements of a full radio tube. With that leap, the proximity fuse moved from a laboratory wonder to a factory product. By December 1944, American plants were turning out about 40,000 fuses every day. More than 100 companies took part, including Radio Corporation of America and General Electric and Sylvania and Crossley Corporation. Assembly lines and inspection lines spread across several states and fed the front at a speed that commanders had never seen. The cost of the program reached $1 billion in 1940s money. Only the Manhattan Project took more in wartime spending. What seemed like a quiet story about wires and glass and solder became a loud change in the field. Shells no longer died in the dirt. They burst in the air where men and machines were most exposed. The result was more than a new tool. It was a turning of the balance that soldiers could feel in their bones and that generals could measure on their maps. Axelson acted on December 16 without waiting for clearance, and the choice set off an immediate crisis in the chain of command. Standing orders had confined proximity fuses to anti-aircraft fire because leaders feared a dud might be recovered by German technicians and copied. At Mona, the payoff was too plain to deny. The assault stalled and losses mounted in minutes, and veteran officers on both sides were shaken by the result. Reports moved from battery to regiment and then to Supreme Headquarters through field telephones and secure radio nets. General Eisenhower judged that the situation across the Ardennes demanded more than caution. On December 19 he asked for authority to free the new fuse for ground combat. On December 21 the prohibition ended and every artillery headquarters in the Bulge was told to draw and fire proximity fused stocks. The speed that followed displayed American logistics at full reach. Ammunition trains and truck convoys pushed forward through snow and clogged roads, and within days cases of the new round sat beside gun pits from north to south across the forested hills. The 463rd Parachute Field Artillery Battalion at Bastonia received its allotment as the German Ring closed and the last usable roads were cut. The 420th Armored Field Artillery Battalion with its M7 Priest self-propelled howitzers began to beat back thrusts on the northwest approaches and registered new defensive lines under pressure. The 969th Artillery Battalion, an African-American unit under Lieutenant Colonel Hubert D. Barnes, put the rounds to work southwest of Bastonia where villages and tree lines funneled attacks. Gunners learned the method in a single fire mission. Load. Set elevation. Fire. Let the fuse choose the height of burst. Forward observers no longer had to walk rounds onto a trench or hedge. The shell found the air above the target and broke there, and steel swept out in a hard flat fan that punished movement and punished shelter. Accuracy requirements eased while destructive power rose, and the effect was that artillery ceased to be a silent partner and became a deciding arm on its own. Bastonia, surrounded but superior, became the textbook case. The 101st Airborne Division held the crossroads, though outnumbered and short of sleep and fuel. Their artillery group included the 463rd Parachute Field Artillery Battalion with 75 mm pack howitzers that could lob proximity fused shells over woods and into concealed draws. From December 19 through December 31, the 463rd fired exactly 7,676 rounds according to the unit record. Shortages meant that only a portion carried the new nose, but each air burst tore at nerve and body alike. German assault lines that had trusted ground cover withered under patterns of mid-air detonations, and whole platoons vanished in seconds when bursts rolled down a white field. On December 22, after General McAuliffe gave his famous nuts reply to the surrender demand, the next German push met that pattern in the open. Snow glare showed every file and every shadow, and the fuses opened above them at the altitude that produced the most fragments. The attack faltered. The observers called for repeat. The line held. The day ended with proof that a device no larger than a coffee tin could alter a battle when industry and delivery put it in the hands of trained crews. Proximity-fused shells burst in the air at calculated heights and intervals that overlapped into a continuous curtain of fragments and shock. There were no gaps where a soldier could feel safe. The All-African Amin 969th Artillery Battalion proved decisive in the same period. Their 155mm howitzers laid down a continuous belt of fire around the perimeter of Bastogne that German units could not break. The largest rounds were set to explode near 50 feet above the ground, and the spread of steel reached far beyond normal craters. German prisoners later described assaults that fell apart before contact with American lines because the sudden air bursts shattered cohesion and nerve. The Sauer River slaughter became the most closely recorded example of what the proximity fuse could do in battle. It unfolded at the Sauer River near Ecton on December 25 and December 26. General George S. Patton and his Third Army were driving north to relieve Bastogne, and he watched the action himself and later noted it in War as I Knew It. A German battalion chose to cross the river while it was partly frozen and believed darkness and fog would hide movement from American eyes. Conventional gunnery would have demanded long adjustment and bracketing, which would have granted the Germans precious minutes to reach the far bank or to take cover. Proximity-fused ammunition erased that delay and removed the guesswork. Patton wrote that his forces caught a German battalion on the Sauer and that the new posit ammunition broke them in the open with air bursts detonating overhead. There was no place to go with the river behind and the fire in front and above. When the guns fell silent, American troops counted 702 bodies. The count was exact and remains one of the rare confirmed casualty totals tied to proximity fuse employment. The efficiency read like an equation without emotion. In only a few minutes a battalion ceased to function with no chance to escape and no effective defense. The shock spread quickly across the local front. German soldiers in nearby formations began to refuse fresh river crossings, and small unit leaders struggled to push patrols beyond the banks. Forest warfare changed as well. The dense growth of the Ardennes became a trap once proximity fuses arrived. In open ground a burst at 30 to 50 feet already killed or wounded across a broad area. In the woods the effect multiplied many times. The shells ripped branches into jagged splinters and hurled them downward and outward like a storm of wooden darts. Some splinters were as long as a man's arm and they flew at hundreds of feet per second with deadly force. Old habits failed. Taking cover behind wide trunks did not help. Foxholes dug into root webs did not help. Fragments and splinters rained from above and negated generations of fieldcraft about how to fight under trees. American artillerymen noticed the multiplier almost at once and adjusted procedures to use it again and again. Forward observers learned to call for air bursts just inside the canopy rather than at ground impact. Gun crews refined the timing of fuses to keep the pattern thick and continuous across assembly areas and likely routes. The result was tactical paralysis among attackers and a rapid erosion of morale. Movement slowed. Orders to advance across open patches or to enter the forest at night drew hesitation. Even when the firing ended, the psychological echo lingered, and that echo protected Bastogne and the relief effort for Bastogne. A single proximity-fused 155mm shell that bursts above the forest roof can wipe clean a space as large as a tennis court. Metal shards from the casing and ragged wooden splinters torn from the trees spread outward in every direction and create a circle of death that no training can beat. German soldiers who had learned to fight among trees discovered that their knowledge failed. When they spread out to limit losses, the wide area effect still found them. When they closed ranks to help one another, a single burst could erase an entire squad. There was no correct move against this new danger. It was technical superiority made visible. The proximity fuse worked with principles that looked like magic to soldiers of the 1940s. Inside each small metal head sat a tiny radio set that operated between 180 and 220 MHz. It sent a steady stream of waves that bounced back from the ground and from trunks and from vehicles and from bodies. As the shell drew nearer, the echo grew stronger. When the echo reached the level tied to the best height for damage, an electronic switch fired the charge. All of this had to keep working under violence that ruined normal equipment. The shell left the gun with a shock that reached 20,000 times the gravity of Earth. Barrels heated the skin to thousands of degrees Fahrenheit, and the flight climbed into air that froze breath. The spin of the projectile created brutal outward force. Yet careful protection of delicate vacuum tubes kept the device alive, and the system reached reliability above 80%. Tests fixed the best burst heights for different guns and calibers. At Aberdeen Proving Ground, the standard 105mm howitzer showed that 30 feet above the surface gave ideal coverage. The 155mm weapons reached peak effect at 50 feet. The rare 240mm shells produced terror at 70 feet and beyond, and they could strip entire grid squares of defenders. This edge in design turned into control of the field. Studies measured gains from 5 times to 10 times in killing power when compared with normal shells. The area where fragments could kill grew by a factor of 50. Results against aircraft looked even more dramatic. Crews that fought V-1 flying bombs improved interception from 17% to 79% within weeks after proximity fuses entered service. German intelligence and leadership failed to read the danger. In December 1944, Wehrmacht forces captured an American ammunition site and took roughly 20,000 shells with proximity fuses. That haul should have forced a rush to build answers. Instead, German specialists looked at the captured parts and judged that the device could not work as described. They wasted the moment, and they paid for it in blood. The forest became a trap. A burst set for 30 to 50 feet already caused terrible wounds in an open field. Under heavy branches, the power multiplied many times. Splinters as long as a forearm fell like a storm of spears, and they moved at hundreds of feet per second. Old habits died. Thick trunks did not save men. Foxholes dug among roots did not save men. Death fell from above and erased rules that had guided fighters for generations. Forward observers learned fast and began to request bursts just beneath the canopy rather than on impact with the soil. Gun crews tuned the timing to keep the sky filled with overlapping patterns. Attackers halted. Orders to enter a stand of trees at night drew silence and slow steps. Even after the batteries stopped, the ringing in the mine stayed, and that echo shaped each new choice on the line. German engineers could not accept that an artillery shell might carry fragile vacuum tubes and still survive firing in flight. The idea violated their trained sense of what electronics and ballistics could endure. Many concluded that the Americans must be using some kind of magnetic trick, or that the visible parts were decoys that hid the real working core. This misreading grew from institutional habits and from choices made before the war. Germany had in fact led work on the proximity fuse in the early period. Rheinmetall Borsig and AEG Berlin had functioning test pieces by the year 1940. Then Hitler ordered the cancellation of any weapons effort that needed more than 6 months to reach production, and the line went dead. The same specialists who stopped the program could not imagine that the Americans had forced solutions to problems they themselves had set aside. The disbelief fed on its own momentum and blinded decision-makers who should have known better. The irony grows sharper when the record of German laboratories is set beside the battlefield. Their electrostatic proximity fuses had shown 95% reliability during trials that measured shifts in electrical capacitance rather than radar signals. If the work had continued without interruption, Germany might have placed proximity fuses in the field by 1941. Hermann Göring later told interrogators that German fuses stood 3 or 4 months from mass production when the fighting ended. The meaning is clear. A path existed. It was not pursued. The loss was not only technical. It was strategic. A single decision cut off a line of invention that could have reshaped entire campaigns in the early years of the conflict. The Christmas catastrophe followed as a grim lesson written in fire. December 25, 1944 brought no rest and no armistice. German formations that tried to use the holiday for resupply and for reorganization learned that proximity fuses honored no pause in battle. Field kitchens drew fire. Supply convoys drew fire. Assembly points drew fire. The rounds found them without the help of forward observers. The 420th Armored Field Artillery Battalion alone sent more than 1,000 shells on Christmas Day, and most of these rounds carried proximity fuses. Their M7 Priest self-propelled howitzers produced quick and steady fire and struck with a speed that left German units unready and exposed. What had once been a daylight arm became a threat that worked through cloud and into night and did not depend on clear sight lines or on visual correction. The mental shock spread fast because the old shelter rules collapsed at once. German soldiers had learned to move when weather turned foul and when Allied aircraft could not fly and when observers could not see. They trusted fog and rain and snow. Proximity fuses erased that safe window. Death could fall at any hour in any weather without more warning than the thin whistle of shells coming in from far away. The habit of choosing poor weather to reduce risk became a habit that no longer worked. Men began to hesitate. The simple act of stepping off a track or lighting a stove became a risk because the sky itself had become the trigger. Malmi and Skorzeni's elite were struck by this new reality as well. On December 21, SS Colonel Otto Skorzeny led his chosen commandos in an attempt to seize Malmedy. These were not ordinary troops. They had rescued Mussolini. They had nearly captured Tito. They had crossed American lines while wearing American uniforms. They represented the sharpest edge that Germany could place in the field. They met proximity-fused artillery that burst above them with a precision that seemed to read their movement and turned their American disguise from a clever tool into a dangerous burden. Exact counts remain debated, but the outcome is not. The attack failed with heavy losses and Scorsese's offensive operations came to an end. The collapse of confidence inside elite formations carried special weight, and it marked the moment when belief in old methods gave way to fear of a device that changed the rules of battle. These soldiers were raised on certainty about German superiority and trained to the highest standards, yet they stood powerless before American technology. Unit cohesion failed under the storm of air bursts and fragments. Eyewitnesses described men who abandoned cover and ran straight toward American lines because a swift end felt easier than waiting for the next strike. That impulse marked a collapse of discipline inside formations that Hitler considered the most loyal and the most resolute. The belief system that had carried them through earlier campaigns met a weapon that did not respect courage or drill, and the result was despair that moved from squad to squad like a cold wind. Behind that effect stood an industrial feat that matched any achievement of the war. By December 1944, more than 100 American companies had shifted entirely to fuse work. The Crosley Corporation left refrigerators for assembly benches. Emerson Radio retooled from household sets to military components. Sylvania RCA and General Electric turned whole plants into dedicated lines. Quality control reached a standard not seen before in mass production. Every one of the 130 parts faced its own test. Each solder joint was checked under magnification. Random lots were fired from guns to prove survival in flight and recoil. The reject bin never stayed empty because even a small deviation meant discard without appeal. A workforce made up largely of women held this precision for 12-hour shifts 6 days each week. Security rules kept them from knowing the full purpose of their labor. They understood only that it was vital and urgent and that the schedule allowed no pause. Output rose until a proximity fuse left the line every 2 seconds around the clock. The price fell across the same period. In 1942, a single unit cost $732, which was more than a typical annual wage. By the last month of 1944, the unit price stood near $18 while reliability stayed high. The scale of delivery changed the battlefield. Factories produced 22 million fuses during the war and 200,000 went forward for the Battle of the Bulge alone. Numbers like these meant that commanders could plan entire operations around air bursts rather than save a few precious rounds for rare targets. The weapon moved from experiment to routine, and routine is what wins campaigns. General George S. Patton grasped the arithmetic faster than most. His Third Army drove to relieve Bastonia and treated the new fuse as a tool for breakthrough. His artillery chief Brigadier General Edward Williams wrote tactics to fit the device rather than forcing the device into old patterns. Williams refined time on target so that many battalions fired in a way that brought shells together over the same grid at the same second. Dozens of proximity-fused rounds detonated at proper height and created a ceiling of steel that no formation could cross. German veterans called that sound the bell toll of death, and the name stayed. During the week from December 22 to December 29, Patton's guns sent 50,000 proximity-fused shells. The result was the opening of the corridor toward Bastonia and the quick erosion of German resistance. Patton later wrote that the funny fuse won the Battle of the Bulge for us, and no one near the front argued with that judgment. Elsenborn Ridge provided the clearest stage for maximum effect. The 2nd and the 99th Infantry Divisions held ground that controlled movement for miles. Across the snow and the bare trees came the 6th SS Panzer Army with the elite 1st SS Panzer Division Luftstandarte Adolf Hitler. Air bursts met their approach and stripped the cover from tree lanes and hedgerows. The ridge did not fall. The forward edge stayed in American hands because artillery reached into every draw and every road and broke attacks before they formed. Across 3 days from December 17 through December 19, American batteries loosed 160,000 shells, and roughly 40,000 of those carried proximity fuses. That quarter of the total created close to 60% of the more than 5,000 German casualties. The ratio could not be argued. The new fuse turned every gun into 4 guns in practical effect. Assault groups that tried to climb the steep forested approaches met layered curtains of air burst steel. Whole companies vanished in moments, and the ground filled so quickly with the fallen that the next waves had to clamber over the bodies of their own comrades. After 3 days the hammering stopped, the frontal pushes ended, and the elite of the Waffen-SS found themselves broken by American technology that they could not outfight. Operation Bodenplatte followed and laid bare the same truth. On January 1, 1945, the Luftwaffe sent 900 fighters against Allied airfields and achieved complete surprise with many aircraft still on the ground. Yet the return flight home became a passage through layered proximity-fused anti-aircraft fire. Of the 277 German aircraft lost that day, 172 fell to anti-aircraft guns, most using proximity fuses. Crews trained to slip predictive fire suddenly faced shells that burst at the exact height where fragments would do the most harm. The Luftwaffe, which had already been crippled by losses and fuel shortage, did not recover from the blow delivered in a single winter morning. Secrecy could not hold under that volume of use. By early January 1945, too many units had received the ammunition and too many soldiers had seen what it did in fog, cloud and snow. On January 6 the War Department approved a limited public description. The New York Times reported a new kind of artillery shell that multiplies the power of American guns but did not reveal the method. 4 days later German intelligence finally recognized the scale of the danger. A January 10 paper from Foreign Armies West concluded that the Americans possess a radio-controlled artillery fuse that detonates at the best height for anti-personnel effect, and that no countermeasures existed for the errands. Post-war assessments fixed the meaning in clear terms. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt stated that the proximity fuse was decisive and that attacks failed not only because of American courage but because of artillery that seemed to carry eyes. General Asso Montoya, who commanded the 5th Panzer Army, testified that American artillery terrified his soldiers and that the shells that burst in the air created panic even among veterans. The numbers matched those judgments. 200,000 proximity-fused shells were fired, and they accounted for an estimated 15,000 to 20,000 German casualties, which was as much as 1/5 of total German losses. In trials and in battle the new fuse delivered between 5 and 10 times the effectiveness of ordinary ammunition, and it often did so without the help of forward observers in poor weather. The figures hide people and the people carry pain that cannot be counted. Behind each entry in a ledger stood a German infantryman or gunner or messenger, many of them boys taken into uniform during the last months of the Reich. They died in ways their teachers and manuals had never imagined. They were cut down by shells that sensed the world around them and chose their moment to burst so that no fold in the ground and no clump of trees offered safety. On the other side of the ocean, American workers in places like Crosley Corporation and Emerson Radio paid in their own coin. Security rules concealed the purpose of their tasks. Accidents were folded into silence. Fatigue and worry followed them home after long shifts. They assembled devices of unfamiliar power while knowing only that delay meant more dead at the front and that the clock did not forgive mistakes. The arithmetic of war never becomes clean. The Battle of the Bulge took the lives of 19,000 Americans and wounded or captured many more. Had the proximity fuse not existed, how many families would have received telegrams and how many months would have been added to a war already swollen with grief? Each day of delay would have meant more trains heading to camps and more lives lost before Allied soldiers could open the gates. The questions are cold, but they carry weight in any honest account of the winter of 1944 and 1945. The device that made shells burst at the best height shortened fights on countless fields, and the shortening of fights saved lives that would otherwise have vanished without a trace. The program that built the fuse changed the future as much as it shaped the present. The small vacuum tubes designed to survive launch recoil heat and cold became a seedbed for later electronics. Methods created to check every part and every joint set models for quality control that factories used long after the war ended. The web that tied together hundreds of suppliers and rushed parts to assembly lines wrote early chapters in modern supply chain management. Out of that same effort came talent that moved beyond artillery. Dr. James Van Allen carried his experience with miniaturization into the age of satellites, and his instruments helped reveal the belts of radiation that encircle Earth. Radar practice refined for the fuse evolved into systems that watched the sky and the sea in peacetime and in war. The deeper idea mattered most. Engineers taught ammunition to read its surroundings and to act without further human touch. That concept of a sensor that makes a choice became the base for guided missiles and later for every form of precision-guided weapon. From anti-aircraft batteries to modern smart artillery and bombs, the family tree points back to the winter fields where the first shells listened for their own echo and then shattered the air at the perfect height. What began as a hard fix to a battlefield problem became a philosophy of design that reshaped combat across generations. The battle itself reached its end on January 25, 1945. German forces that had surged westward fell back in disorder. Hitler's last throw had spent men, fuel and aircraft and had gained nothing that could be held. German losses reached roughly 100,000 and American losses climbed to about 75,000 with 19,000 killed. In the judgments written soon after and in the histories that followed, the proximity fuse stood out as a war winner rather than a clever accessory. General Eisenhower warned that if Germany had possessed similar fuses, the landings on D-Day might have been exceedingly difficult and perhaps impossible, and that assessment underlines the scale of what was at stake. For the soldiers on the receiving end there was a sense that the very air had turned hostile. They told of shells that seemed to think and to find them anywhere, and of moments when tree lanes and road cuts turned into killing grounds without visible gunners or observed corrections. Their memories marked the turning of warfare into something governed by sensors and circuits as much as by muscle and courage. The Ardennes became the place where that turn first became visible to thousands, and where the lesson entered doctrine, plans and factories that would define the decades ahead. The legacy does not rest only in museums or in pages of reports. It lives in the expectation that a weapon will measure and decide and strike with economy. It lives in manufacturing floors that still follow inspection steps born in secrecy. It lives in the idea that speed and precision can spare friendly lives and shorten wars even as they make destruction more exact. The proximity fuse was a hinge on which both outcomes swing. It reduced the time between contact and decision on the battlefield, and it compressed the time between idea and effect in the workshop, and that compression has become a hallmark of the technological age. In the end, the story holds grief, achievement, fear, and relief together. Teenagers in Feldgrau crumpled under air bursts that no trench could stop. Women and men at soldering benches pushed through exhaustion and did not know why until the papers finally printed a guarded description. Commanders counted losses and gains and found that a small device carried the weight of entire operations. The winter campaign closed the door on the last German offensive and opened another onto a world where weapons sense and act, and where victory often belongs to those who best align science with production and doctrine. On December 16, 1944, Colonel Axelson carried out the first unauthorized use of the proximity fuse. What began as a single field decision turned into a deliberate rollout of roughly 200,000 shells across the Ardennes. The new fuse proved in real combat that science applied with urgency could deliver a decisive edge. American factories, research teams, and artillery units moved in step and turned a fresh idea into a battlefield habit. That alignment of industrial capacity, scientific problem solving, and quick tactical learning forged a tool that pressed the war in a new direction. The story of the proximity fuse is a story of change on many levels. It is technological because tiny radar sets could now guide destruction in the air above the target. It is tactical because commanders altered fire missions and timing to exploit air bursts. It is human because soldiers on both sides felt its effects and adjusted their behavior with fear and respect. The experience showed that an industrial democracy could build weapons of severe effectiveness without losing speed or scale. It also showed that innovation could offset fewer guns or men, and that the side with stronger science would usually gain the initiative and hold it. These lessons influenced the closing phases of World War II and then continued to shape doctrine, procurement, and training for decades. In the frozen forests of the Ardennes, a threshold was crossed and modern technological warfare came fully into view. The arithmetic of killing changed when small radar devices rode inside artillery shells and detonated at the right height. From that point forward, the method of waging war changed in practice and in mindset. German soldiers killed under proximity-fused air bursts fell not only to a single engagement but to a wider revolution in military affairs that still reaches into our present world today.